Hey guys, tonight we slip into the flickering candlelight of a medieval wedding chamber, where the air is thick with expectation and dread. Picture yourself as a young bride, your heart thudding against a corset laced too tight, the weight of an entire village's eyes on you. The wedding feast is over, the raucous laughter fading, and now you're led to a room you've never seen, to a man you barely know. This isn't the fairy tale romance of modern movies. Oh no, this is a night where survival feels like a long shot. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a stone-walled chamber, the straw mattress creaking under a thin blanket. The scent of damp wool and tallow candle stings your nose. This is the medieval wedding night, a moment romanticized in modern tales, but feared by women of the time. Well, because it wasn't just about love or even lust. It was a transaction, a public spectacle, and a test of your worth. Your role as a bride wasn't to feel butterflies. It was to prove your family's honor, secure alliances, and frankly, not mess it up. One wrong move, and you could be the talk of the village, or worse, cast aside. Historians note that marriage in the Middle Ages, roughly 500 to 1500 CE, was a cornerstone of social order, binding families and fortunes. But for women, it was a gauntlet of fear, obligation, and scrutiny. Let's set the scene. You're likely young, maybe 15, possibly younger, if your family's desperate for a deal. Your groom could be a stranger chosen by your father for his land or title. The church looms large, preaching that marriage is sacred, but it's also a contract, and tonight seals the deal. You've heard whispers about what's expected, but no one spelled it out. Your mother's vague advice about enduring doesn't help. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some villages believed a bride's tears on her wedding night brought good luck. So crying wasn't just allowed, it was encouraged. Talk about pressure to perform, even in misery. You glance at the door, half hoping for an escape. There isn't one. The room feels smaller as the reality sinks in. This night isn't yours. It belongs to your family, your husband, even the nosy neighbors who'll gossip tomorrow. Historians still argue whether most brides felt more fear or resignation, with some claiming noblewomen trained for duty fared better than peasants who faced raw uncertainty. But fear was universal. You're not just losing your freedom, you're stepping into a role where failure could mean shame or worse. A noblewoman named Marjorie Kempa, who later wrote about her life, hinted at her dread of marital duties, proof even the devout struggled. The bed looms like a battlefield. You're not just nervous about the act itself, though that's bad enough with medieval hygiene being, let's say, an acquired taste. Joke 1. Imagine a groom thinking a quick rinse in the river counts as fresh. It's the stakes. If you don't perform, rumors could spread. If you're not a virgin or can't prove it, your family's honor tanks. And if you don't conceive soon, you're already failing at job number 1, producing heirs. The pressure's crushing, and it's only night 1. You pull the blanket closer, the coarse fabric scratching your skin. Outside, someone's still singing a bawdy wedding song, oblivious to your racing pulse. But it's not just about you and him. The whole community's invested. In some regions, guests lingered outside the chamber, waiting for proof the marriage was consummated. A bloodied sheet might be paraded the next morning. Yep, that's a thing. privacy. Not in this century. Joke 2, you'd have better luck hiding in a barrel of mead. The church might preach modesty, but society demanded results. You're caught in a paradox. Be pure, but also fruitful, and do it under everyone's watchful eyes. No wonder your stomach's in knots. You try to steady your breathing, counting the cracks in the ceiling. Maybe he's kind, you think, but kindness isn't guaranteed. Some grooms saw their brides as property, a mindset backed by law and custom. If he's drunk from the feast, likely given the free-flowing ale, things could get rough. You've heard stories of brides bruised or humiliated, though no one talks openly. The fear of violence hovers unspoken, but real. And here's a fringe fact. Some brides carried a small charm, like a sprig of rosemary, believing it warded off evil spirits or a cruel husband. Superstition was your only shield. As the candle sputters, you wonder how you got here. It started with a betrothal, maybe years ago when you were too young to understand. Your parents haggled over dowries, land, or status, and you were the currency. Love, that's a modern luxury. Duty is what binds you now. You think of your sister married off last year, her tight-lipped warnings about pleasing him. Joke 3, if only pleasing him meant serving him slightly burnt bread. The weight of tradition presses down, and you feel like a pawn in a game you didn't choose. But you're not alone in this. Across medieval Europe, from muddy villages to stone castles, women faced the same dread. Some were luckier. Maybe their groom was gentle, or the marriage familiar. Others weren't. The system didn't care about your feelings. It cared about alliances, heirs, and honor. You clench your fists, nails digging into your palms. Tonight, you're not just a bride. You're a symbol, a sacrifice, and a survivor. The door creaks open and your breath catches. Whatever happens next, you'll face it because you have to. This is just the beginning. The wedding night's fears weren't just about one moment. They were rooted in a world that saw women as tools, not people. As you lie there heart pounding, you're already learning what it means to endure. And trust me, it gets wilder from here. You're still reeling from the weight of that wedding night. The candle's dim glow now a faint memory as you step into the world that led you here. The medieval marriage machine didn't start in the bedchamber. It began years earlier, when you were just a pawn in a betrothal deal. You're trudging through a muddy village, maybe 12 years old, unaware that your future's already been sold. Your father's shaking hands with a man you've never met, sealing a contract that'll chain you to a stranger. Betrothals weren't romantic proposals. They were ironclad traps, and you're caught in one. The air smells of damp hay and wood smoke, and you feel a knot in your stomach, sensing something's wrong, even if no one's told you yet. Betrothals were the backbone of medieval society, tying families together like knots in a fisherman's net. Historians point out that by the 12th century, the church had formalized marriage as a sacrament, but betrothals were still business deals. Your parents didn't ask your opinion, they couldn't afford to. Land alliances or a boost in status were at stake. You might be promised to a boy from the next village, or a grizzled lord twice your age, depending on what your family needed. The deal was sealed with a handshake, maybe a small gift, and you were expected to nod and obey. A quirky tidbit in some regions, betrothal ceremonies included breaking a straw in half, symbolizing the split between your old life and the one you're doomed to enter. Poetic, but not exactly comforting. You kick a pebble down the path, wishing you could run. But where to? The village is small, and everyone's in on it. Your mother's already planning your trousseau. Your neighbors are gossiping about the match. You overhear them whispering about the groom's family, their wealth, or their temper. Historians still argue whether betrothals gave families more security or just bred resentment, with some saying peasant girls had slightly more say than nobles who were pawns in bigger games. But say is generous. You might beg your father to reconsider, but his word's law backed by custom and the church. Defying him could mean a beating, or worse, disinheritance, leaving you with nothing. The betrothal isn't just a promise, it's a cage. Once you're pledged, backing out is nearly impossible. If you try, your family could face shame or a lawsuit. Yes, medieval people loved their legal drama. The church courts, called ecclesiastical courts, handled broken betrothals, and they weren't kind to rebels. You're stuck counting the years until the wedding. Sometimes it's quick, especially if you're a noble and the alliance is urgent. Other times you wait, the dread growing like mold on old bread. Joke 1: at least moldy bread might distract you from the panic. You're not just waiting for a husband, you're waiting for a life you didn't choose. Picture yourself at the betrothal feast, a rare moment of celebration. The tables are laden with coarse bread and watery ale, and everyone's acting like this is great news. You're dressed in your best kirtle, the wool itching your skin, and you're supposed to smile. Your groom-to-be might be there staring at you like you're a prize cow. Or maybe he's absent off fighting or managing his lands, and you're left imagining him. Either way, you feel like a prop in someone else's story. The community's watching, judging your every move. A misstep, like spilling ale or looking too sullen, could spark rumors you're unfit for marriage. Joke 2: imagine being canceled for bad table manners in 1300. But it's not just social pressure. Betrothals came with rules, and you're expected to follow them. You're supposed to stay pure until the wedding, a demand rooted in the obsession with virginity we'll dig into later. If there's even a hint of scandal, your family's honor could crumble. In some places, betrothed couples were allowed to court under supervision, but don't picture stolen kisses. It was more like awkward small talk, while your aunt glares from the corner. And here's a fringe fact: some betrothed girls wore a ring or a knotted cord as a public sign of their status, like a medieval engagement bling that screamed property reserved. No pressure, right? You're starting to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about you and your groom, it's about power. Your marriage could secure a trade route, end a feud, or bring your family a juicy piece of land. Noble betrothals were especially cutthroat, with kings and lords using their daughters like chess pieces. Think of Eleanor of Aquitaine, betrothed at 15 to the future King of France. Her marriage reshaped Europe's map. But even peasants played the game, bartering their kids for a few acres or a better spot at the market. Your currency, and it stings. As you walk back to your family's hut, the weight of it hits you. You're not just losing your freedom, you're losing your voice. No one's asking what you want, and the few who care can't change it. You think of your older cousin betrothed to a man who turned out to be cruel. She tried to refuse, but her father locked her in the cellar until she came to her senses. Resistance is a luxury you don't have. Joke 3. Maybe you could bribe the village goat to eat the betrothal contract. You lie awake that night, the straw mattress poking your back, wondering who this stranger is and what he'll expect. The betrothal's just the start, but it's already suffocating. You're marked claimed, and there's no turning back. The wedding night you dreaded last section. It's the finish line of a race you never wanted to run. Every step, every handshake, every feast tightens the noose. You're not just a girl anymore. You're a bride-to-be, and that role comes with a script you can't rewrite. The village dogs bark in the distance, and you pull your blanket tighter, wishing for a miracle. But miracles are scarce in this world, and the betrothal's only the first trap. You're starting to understand why that wedding night felt so heavy. It wasn't just the act, it was the years of deals and expectations piling up. As you drift into uneasy sleep, you can't shake the feeling that you're walking a path someone else carved. The next trap's waiting, and it's called a dowry. But for now, you're still a girl clinging to the last scraps of a life that's slipping away. You're trudging through the village again, the betrodhal's shadow still clinging to you like damp wool. Now you're older, maybe 14, and the wedding's creeping closer. Your mother's fussing over a chest in the corner of your hut, muttering about linens and silver spoons. This is your dowry, the price of your future, and it's about to shape your fate in ways you can't imagine. You pause hands on a rough wooden table, the scent of barley stew lingering in the air. The dowry isn't just stuff, it's a deal that could make or break your life, and you've got no say in it. Welcome to the medieval marriage market where you're the goods, and the stakes are brutal. The dowry was a cornerstone of medieval marriage, a custom stretching back to Roman times, and codified by the 12th century across Europe. It's your family's payment to the groom's side land, money, or goods to sweeten the deal. In return, the groom might offer a dower a portion of his wealth to support you if he dies first. Sounds fair? Hardly. Your dowry's size could decide whether you marry a kind merchant or a leering old lord. Too small, and you're stuck with a nobody or no one at all. Historians note that dowries were non-negotiable in most regions, from England's manors to Italy's city-states. Without one, you're as good as unmarriageable a burden to your family. You watch your mother count out coins, her fingers trembling. Your family's not rich. Maybe you're peasants with a few pigs and a patch of land. Every spoon, every scrap of cloth is a sacrifice. If you're noble, the stakes are higher. Think fields, livestock, or even a castle. Your dowry's supposed to prove your worth, but it feels like a ransom. Here's a quirky tidbit in some Italian towns. Families paid dowry insurance to guarantee they could cough up the goods when the time came. Imagine your future hinging on a medieval GoFundMe. Joke one, at least you didn't have to Venmo your groom's family. But it's not just about money. The dowry's a power play. Your father's haggling with the groom's kin, each side trying to outsmart the other. A big dowry might snag you a better husband, but it could also make you a target. Some grooms saw brides as walking bank accounts, their dowries a quick way to pay off debts or fund a war. You've heard stories of girls whose dowries vanished into their husband's gambling habit, leaving them with nothing. If the dowry's too small, the groom's family might scorn you, treating you like a servant in your new home. Historians still argue whether dowries empowered families or just trapped women in bad matches, with some claiming wealthy brides had more leverage. Leverage, though. That's a fantasy when you're not the one signing the contract. You sit by the fire, the crackle of logs drowning out your thoughts. Your dowry's being tallied, but no one's asking what you want. Maybe you'd rather stay home, tend the garden, or learn to read like the priest's niece. Too bad your role is to be useful, and the dowry's your ticket out. If your family's poor, they might borrow to boost your dowry, plunging into debt. If they're rich, they'll flaunt it piling on jewels to impress the neighbors. Either way, you're a bargaining chip, and the pressure's suffocating. Joke 2. Imagine your dowry, including a grumpy old cow that hates your groom. The dowry's also a public affair. The village knows what your family's offering. Gossip spreads faster than a summer fire. If your dowry's impressive, you're a prize. If it's meager, you're pitied, maybe mocked. You overhear the baker's wife clucking about a girl whose dowry was just a sack of grain and a wobbly table. She married a drunk who beat her. You shudder, wondering if that's your fate. And here's a fringe fact. In some regions, dowries included cursed items, like a ring tied to a family feud, believed to bring bad luck. Superstition or not, you don't want that kind of baggage. As the wedding nears, the dowry's finalized. Your mother shows you the chest, a few dresses, a quilt, some pewter plates. It's everything your family could spare, and it still might not be enough. You feel like a commodity, your value measured in goods, not dreams. Noble girls face the same, just on a grander scale. Think of Anne of Bohemia, whose dowry to marry Richard II included political alliances, but left her homesick and scrutinized. Your dowry's smaller, but the game's the same. You're traded for profit, and failure's not an option. The worst part, the dowry could haunt you after the wedding. If your husband mismanages it, you're blamed. If you don't produce heirs, people whisper the dowry was wasted. Some brides were sent back to their families in disgrace, their dowries partially refunded like a defective product. The church might mediate, but courts favored men. You're starting to see why that wedding night felt so heavy. Remember that creaky bed and nosy guests. The dowry's part of the machine, grinding you into a role you can't escape. You walk outside the night air sharp against your face. The stars are out, but they offer no answers. Your dowry set the betrothal's binding, and the wedding's coming. You think of your friend who married last year. Her dowry was decent, but her husband's cruel. She warned you to keep quiet no matter what. Resistance feels pointless, but you clench your fists anyway. Joke 3. Maybe you could accidentally pack a broken spoon to sabotage the deal. The dowry's not just goods. It's a chain linking you to a future you can't control. You're starting to feel the full weight of this world. The betrothal trapped you, the dowry priced you, and the wedding night's looming like a storm. Every step pulls you deeper into a system that doesn't care about your fears. You kick the dirt, wishing you could scream. But the village is quiet, and your role is clear. Carry the dowry smile, and hope your groom's not a monster. The next trap's waiting, and it's all about purity. For now, you're still you. But the chest in the corner reminds you that time's running out. You're standing in your family's hut, the dowry chest now locked and looming in the corner like a silent judge. The wedding's closer, and the village is buzzing with preparations. But you're caught in a new kind of dread. It's not just about the groom or the goods anymore. It's about you, specifically your body and its purity. The medieval world's obsessed with your virginity, and it's turning your wedding night into a public trial. You clutch a worn shawl, the air heavy with the scent of drying herbs and anxiety. Everyone's watching, waiting to see if you pass the test that defines your worth. Virginity was a cultural fixation in medieval Europe, rooted in both church doctrine and social custom. By the 13th century, the church taught that chastity was a woman's highest virtue, especially for brides. Your virginity wasn't just personal. It was a commodity tied to family honor and the marriage contract. If you're not pure, the deal could collapse, your dowry wasted, your family shamed. The pressure's suffocating, and it's not just about staying chaste. You have to prove it, often in humiliating ways. A mainstream fact in England and France, legal disputes over virginity could end up in church courts with physical examinations to settle the matter. No pressure, right? You glance at your mother, who's stitching a new shift for the wedding night. She's tight-lipped, but her warnings are clear. Don't wander alone. Don't talk to men. Don't give anyone a reason to doubt you. The village is a minefield of gossip. A lingering glance at the miller's son could spark rumors that tank your reputation. You're not even sure what impure means. Nobody's explained the details, and asking feels dangerous. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some communities believed a virgin bride's blood on the wedding night could bless the marriage, leading to bizarre rituals, like displaying the bed sheet. Joke 1, imagine waving a sheet like a victory flag, but it's your dignity on parade. The obsession runs deep. If you're noble, your virginity's a political asset, ensuring your heirs are legitimate. If you're a peasant, it's about honor and avoiding scandal. Either way, the stakes are brutal. Historians still argue whether this fixation protected women or just controlled them, with some saying it gave brides a kind of sacred status, while others call it oppression, dressed in piety. You feel the latter, trapped in a body that's not yours to govern. The church preaches modesty, but society's watching your every move, ready to pounce if you slip. You step outside the village, bustling with wedding chatter. The baker's wife eyes you, her smirk, suggesting she's already judging. You've heard stories of girls accused of impurity, based on nothing, maybe a rival's grudge, or a bad harvest, blamed on sinful brides. In some places, grooms could annul a marriage if they doubted your virginity, leaving you disgraced and your family in debt. The fear's constant, like a stone in your shoe. You're supposed to be pure, but nobody tells you how to navigate a world where a rumor could ruin you. Joke 2, maybe you could wear a certified virgin badge to shut them up. It's not just the wedding night itself. Remember that creaky bed from the first night. The lead-up is a gauntlet. Some regions had pre-wedding rituals to confirm your chastity, like inspections by midwives or even noblewomen. These weren't gentle check-ins. They were invasive, public, and mortifying. You shudder imagining strangers debating your body like it's a market pig. And here's a fringe fact. In parts of Germany, brides wore virginity belts during betrothals, not for chastity, but as symbolic gifts to grooms, signaling their untouched status. Talk about a creepy keepsake. You're starting to see the bigger picture. The betrothal locked you in the dowry, priced you, and now your virginity's the final hurdle. It's not about love or trust, it's about proof. The wedding night's less about you and your groom than about satisfying a community obsessed with control. You think of your cousin, married last spring, who whispered about the shame of being inspected before her wedding. She passed, but the memory haunts her. You're terrified of failing, not because you've done anything, but because the rules feel rigged. As the day approaches, the pressure mounts. Your mother hands you the white shift, a symbol of purity that feels more like a target. You're supposed to wear it proudly, but it's a reminder that your body's on trial. Some brides, you've heard, were given herbal tonics to ensure bleeding on the wedding night, medieval medicine at its finest. The thought makes you queasy, but refusing isn't an option. You're caught in a system where your worth hinges on something you can't fully control. Joke 3, maybe you could bribe the midwife with a loaf of bread to fake the results. You walk to the church where the priest drones about virtue. His words feel hollow. The church might call virginity sacred, but it's also a weapon used to keep you in line. You're not just a bride. You're a symbol of your family's honor, your groom's pride, and the village's moral order. Failure could mean exile, or worse, a life as a shunned spinster. You think of Marjorie Kempe again from that first night, who wrote about her struggles with marital expectations. Even she, a devout woman, felt trapped by this obsession, the sun setting, casting long shadows over the village. You pull your shawl tighter, the weight of expectation heavier than ever. The wedding's tomorrow, and the virginity test, literal or social looms. You're not sure what's worse, the act itself, or the scrutiny that follows. Every step from the betrothal to the dowry to this feels like a trap tightening around you. You're supposed to be pure, but purity feels like a cage. The next hurdle's the wedding night itself, where consummation becomes another public affair. For now, you're still you. But the white shift in your hands reminds you that your body's not your own. You're finally here the wedding night, standing in that dimly lit chamber from the first night, the straw mattress creaking under your weight. The feast is over, the guests' laughter fading, but the real ordeal's just beginning. Your white shift clings to your skin, a flimsy shield against what's coming. This isn't just about you and your groom. It's about consummation, a word that's been whispered like a curse. The medieval world's watching, and this moment's a public ritual, not a private one. You clutch the blanket, the air thick with tallow smoke, and dread knowing this night's about sealing the deal in the most invasive way possible. Consummation was the linchpin of medieval marriage, a legal and social necessity to make the union binding. Historians confirm that by the 12th century, the church and secular law required proof the marriage was completed to secure inheritance alliances and honor. Without it, the betrothal dowry and virginity obsession, remember those traps could unravel. The pressure's not just on you, it's on the marriage itself, but you're the one who bears it. Your job is to make this night count, no matter how you feel. A quirky tidbit in some French regions' consummation was so critical that priests blessed the marriage bed beforehand, sprinkling holy water to aid the act. Joke 1. Nothing says romance like a priest spritzing your mattress. You glance at the door, half expecting someone to barge in. You're not wrong to worry. In many places, consummation wasn't private. Guests, family, friends, even local lords might linger outside shouting bawdy encouragement or worse, demanding proof. The infamous bedsheet display tied to that virginity obsession was real in parts of Europe. You're supposed to produce blood, a sign of purity and success, to be paraded like a trophy. The thought makes your stomach churn. Privacy's a myth, and the community's investment in your body feels suffocating. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about ensuring legitimacy or just humiliating control, with some claiming peasants faced less scrutiny than nobles. But you're not feeling any less trapped. The groom's beside you, now his breath heavy with ale. He's not a monster, maybe, but he's a stranger, shaped by a world that sees you as his property. The church calls this your marital duty, but it feels like a performance. You've heard whispers about what to expect. Vague warnings from your mother, giggles from married friends, but no one's prepared you for the reality. The act itself is daunting, especially with medieval hygiene being, let's say, creative. Joke 2, imagine him thinking a splash of mead counts as a bath, but it's the stakes that crush you. If this night fails, if there's no blood, no proof, the marriage could be questioned, your dowry disputed, your family shamed. You try to focus on the flickering candle, its wax, pooling like your scattered thoughts. The rituals don't end with the act. In some regions, consummation was witnessed indirectly, elders or kin waiting nearby to confirm it happened. In extreme cases, like among high nobility, attendants might stay in the room, veiled by curtains, but still there. You're not a person. You're a contract being notarized. And here's a fringe fact. In parts of Italy, a notary might record the consummation success for legal records, turning your intimacy into paperwork. Imagine your wedding night filed next to grain taxes. The pressure's not just external. You're terrified of disappointing him. He's been told you're pure valuable a prize, thanks to that dowry and betrothal hustle. If you freeze or flinch, he might take it personally. Or worse, spread rumors. Some grooms expected enthusiasm, a tall order, when you're shaking with nerves. You think of your sister married last year, who hinted at faking it to keep her husband happy. The thought's exhausting, but resistance isn't an option. The Church's doctrine of conjugal debt means you owe him this, a concept we'll dig into later. For now, it's enough to know you're not allowed to say no. You pull the blanket closer, the coarse weave scratching your arms. The community's outside waiting for their proof, their gossip, their victory. You're not just consummating a marriage, you're upholding a system. Nobles needed heirs to secure dynasties. Peasants needed children to work the fields. Failure could mean annulment, a disaster that'd send you back to your family in disgrace, your dowry half gone. You've heard of girls who faced this labeled barren or defective before they had a chance. The fear's a weight on your chest heavier than the groom's arm now resting near you. But it's not just about tonight. Consummation sets the tone for your marriage. A successful night might earn you respect, or at least tolerance in your new home. A failure could mark you as trouble, a wife who can't deliver. You're already learning to navigate this, to swallow your fear and play the part. Joke 3. Maybe you could distract him with a rousing game of guess the candle wax shapes. You think of that rosemary charm from the first night, wishing it could ward off more than spirits. Superstition's no match for reality, though. As the night unfolds, you're hyper-aware of every sound. The wind rattling the shutters, the distant bark of a dog. You're performing for an audience. You can't see their expectations woven into every moment. The Church might call this sacred, but it feels like a transaction. Your body, the currency. You remember Marjorie Kempe's memoirs, her dread of these duties, even years into marriage. If a devout woman struggled, what chance do you have? The system's rigged, and you're just trying to survive. You're starting to see how every step, betrothal, dowry, virginity, led to this. The wedding night's not the end. It's the climax of a process that's been squeezing you since childhood. You're not just a bride. You're a symbol, a tool, a proof of contract. The candle's burning low, its light barely reaching the corners. Whatever happens next, you'll face it because you have to. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the power plays that turn your bedchamber into a battlefield. For now, you're still here, heart pounding, bracing for a night that's anything but yours. You're lying in that same creaky bed, the wedding night's ordeal still raw, the candle long snuffed out. Dawn's creeping through the shutters, but there's no relief. You're not just a bride, now you're a player in a game of power, and the bedchamber's your battlefield. The consummation sealed the deal, but it also opened a new arena where politics, not passion rule. You pull the blanket tighter, the straw mattress poke in your back, and brace for what's next. This marriage isn't just about you and him, it's a chessboard, and you're a pawn in moves that started before you were born. Medieval marriages were power plays, knitting families' lands and ambitions into alliances that could shift kingdoms or villages. Historians point to the 14th century, when strategic marriages among nobility, like Edward III's daughter Isabella, to a French lord, reshaped European politics. But even peasants played the game, their unions securing grazing rights or a better spot at the market. Your bedchamber's a stage where these deals are cemented and every move you make or don't ripples outward. Your groom's not just a husband, he's a partner in a contract, and you're the glue holding it together, or the weak link that could break it. You shift the bed, groaning under you, and catch his sleeping form in the gray light. He's not the only one with stakes here. His family's watching, expecting you to deliver, whether it's heirs' loyalty or the dowry's promised wealth. Your family's counting on you, too, hoping this match boosts their status or buries old feuds. The pressures of vice squeezing you from all sides. Here's a quirky tidbit in some English villages the morning after the wedding. Kin from both sides met to inspect the couple's harmony, gossiping over bread and ale about your success. Joke 1. Imagine your in-laws rating your marriage like a Yelp review for a bad tavern. But it's not just about family. The bedchamber's a political hotspot because it's where power shifts. If you're noble, your marriage might seal a treaty or fund a war. Your womb's a dynasty factory, and every night's a chance to produce an heir who will carry the family name. Failure could spark disputes. Think of noble women like Joan of Navarre, whose childless first marriage fueled court rivalries. If you're a peasant, the game's smaller, but no less cutthroat. Your kids might mean extra hands in the fields or a tie to a wealthier clan. Either way, your body's a bargaining chip and the stakes are public. You sit up the cold air biting your shoulders. The village is waking and you're already dreading the day. People will ask questions, subtle or not, about how the night went. Did you please him? Was there blood on the sheet like they wanted? The consummation ritual's still fresh, and now it's feeding this power play. Historians still argue whether bedchamber politics empowered women, or just objectified them with some claiming queens and highborn ladies wielded influence through their fertility. But you're not feeling powerful. You're a tool, and the game's rigged against you. The real kicker: your groom holds the cards. Medieval law and custom gave him control over you, the dowry, even the marriage's future. If he's pleased, he might treat you decently, cementing the alliance. If not, he could complain to his kin, sparking tension between families. You've heard of brides blamed for failing their husbands, their dowries clawed back in petty revenge. The church might preach equality in marriage, but in practice, you're his to command. Joke 2. Maybe you could negotiate peace with a well-timed pillow fort. And it's not just him. Outsiders meddle too. If your noble courtiers, or rival lords, might spread rumors to weaken the alliance. A barren wife or a cold bride could be slandered to justify annulment or war. Peasants faced their own virgin village gossips, or jealous kin stirring trouble if the marriage didn't deliver. You're starting to see why that betrothal and dowry felt so heavy. They were investments, and now the bedchambers were the payouts judged. A fringe fact in some German courts, a bedding ceremony involved kin tucking the couple in a symbolic nod to the alliance's importance. Creepy, But it shows how public this was. You stand your bare feet on the cold floor and peek outside. The village is stirring smoke rising from chimneys. You're not just navigating your husband. Now you're dodging a web of expectations. Every night in this bed is a chance to strengthen or ruin the deal. If you conceive quickly, you're a hero. If not, whispers start. You think of your friend married to a merchant last year, who faced snide comments when her first year passed, childless. She warned you to act content no matter what. Resistance feels futile, but you're learning to play the part, smiling through the fear. The power dynamics don't stop at the bedchamber door. Your husband's family might demand you prove your loyalty, shunning your own kin maybe, or siding with them in disputes. If you're noble, you might be expected to charm allies at feasts, your grace, a reflection of the marriage's strength. If you're a peasant, you're working as fields, your labor tying the families closer. Every choice is political, and you're walking a tightrope. Joke 3, maybe you could win them over with a strategic batch of lumpy porridge. You're starting to feel the full scope of this. The betrothal set the stage. The dowry paid the price. The virginity test judged you, and the consummation sealed it. Now, the bedchamber's where the alliance lives or dies. You're not just a wife. You're a diplomat, a symbol, a wager. The system's built to keep you in line, and the power's rarely yours. You think of Marjorie Kempe again, her memoirs hinting at the strain of pleasing a husband while juggling everyone's expectations. If she struggled, what hope do you have? As the sun rises, you brace for the day. You'll face questions, smirks, maybe pity. The bedchamber's no sanctuary. It's a council chamber where your every move's weighed. The next trap's waiting, and it's about what your husband expects night after night. For now, you're still here, heart-heavy, learning to navigate a game you didn't choose. You're back in that bedchamber the morning after the wedding night, the village waking outside with clattering carts and bleating goats. The air's damp smelling of wood smoke and last night's fear. You're sore, exhausted, but there's no time to process. Your husband's stirring his expectations, already looming like a storm cloud. The consummation's done, the alliance sealed, but now you're facing the real grind, what he wants from you. Not just tonight, but every night. You smooth your shift, the fabric worn thin, and brace for a role that feels like a sentence. This isn't about love. It's about meeting demands that could break you. Medieval husbands held near absolute power over their wives, a fact cemented by law and church doctrine. By the 13th century, secular courts across Europe upheld a man's right to govern his wife from her labor to her body. Your husband expects you to be obedient, fertile, and pleasing, 3 words that sum up a lifetime of pressure. He's not just your partner, he's your lord, and the bedchamber's where his authority plays out. Your job is to satisfy him, uphold the marriage, and keep the peace, no matter the cost. A mainstream fact in England, legal texts like the 1275 Statute of Westminster reinforced a husband's control, even allowing moderate punishment for defiance. Comforting, right? You sit on the bed's edge, the straw crunching beneath you. He's awake now, grumbling about the day's work. You're supposed to anticipate his mood, his needs, his desires. If he's noble, he might expect you to play the perfect lady charming at feasts, devout in prayer, and eager in bed. If he's a peasant, he wants a worker who'll plow fields by day and warm his bed by night. Either way, his expectations are a checklist, and you're ticking boxes to survive. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some French villages, husbands gave morning gifts, after the wedding night, a trinket or coin if you performed well. Joke 1. Imagine getting a shiny penny for surviving his ale-soaked snoring. The bedchamber's no refuge. It's a proving ground. He expects intimacy on demand, a right backed by the church's conjugal debt doctrine, which says you owe each other your bodies. Refusal's not just rebellion, it's sin, and he could drag you to a priest to complain. You've heard of women shamed this way, their defiance aired in church courts. The pressure's relentless, especially since he's been raised to see you as his property, like the dowry chest from that earlier deal. You're supposed to be grateful, but gratitude's hard when you're terrified of failing. Historians still argue whether husbands' expectations varied by class, with some saying peasants were less demanding than nobles, obsessed with heirs. You're not sure it matters. Expectations crush you either way. You glance at him, his face shadowed in the morning light. He's not cruel, maybe, but he's shaped by a world that puts him first. If you don't please him, he might turn cold, or worse, violent. You've heard whispers of wives bruised for disobedience, though no one speaks openly. The fear's a constant hum like the buzz of flies in summer. And it's not just physical. He expects you to mold yourself to his whims, laugh at his jokes, cook his favorite stew, bear his children without complaint. Joke 2. Maybe you could accidentally burn his stew to assert some tiny rebellion. The weight's heavier because it's not just him. His family's watching, judging your performance as a wife. If you're noble, his mother might criticize your embroidery or your failure to conceive. If you're a peasant, his kin expect you to work their fields while keeping him happy. The bedchamber's a stage, and you're playing to an audience that never leaves. Here's a fringe fact. In some Italian cities, husbands kept score of their wives' duties in household ledgers, tallying everything from meals to intimacy like a medieval spreadsheet. Imagine your life reduced to check marks. You stand your legs shaky and start tidying the room. Every task feels like part of the role wife, servant, mother-to-be. He expects you to conceive quickly a demand tied to that power play from the last section. A son means security status, a legacy. No son or no children could make him resent you, blaming you for what's beyond your control. You think of your aunt married a decade, with no living child, her husband's scorn, a village legend. She warned you to pray for fertility, as if prayer could fix biology. The pressure's a knot in your chest, tightening with every glance he gives you. It's not just about babies. He expects loyalty even if he's not loyal himself. Medieval society winked at men's affairs, but crucified women for the same. A hint of flirtation could ruin you. Your dowry seized your name, trashed. You're supposed to be his alone body and soul, while he faces no such cage. The unfairness burns, but speaking up's a risk you can't take. You're learning to swallow your thoughts to smile when you want to scream. Joke 3. Maybe you could train the village dog to growl at his wandering eyes. You step outside, the morning air sharp against your face. The village is alive, women fetching water, men heading to the fields. You're one of them now, a wife with a role to play. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose memoirs hinted at the strain of meeting her husband's endless demands. If a woman like her, bold and devout, struggled, what chance do you have? The system's built to keep you in line, and his expectations are the bars of your cage. Every night in that bed is a test, and failing could mean shame, pain, or worse. You're starting to see how every step led here. The betrothal trapped you. The dowry priced you. The virginity test judged you. The consummation sealed you, and the bedchamber's politics bound you. Now his expectations are the daily grind, shaping your every move. You're not just a wife, you're a servant to his will, a vessel for his heirs, a prop for his pride. The next trap's waiting, and it's about your voice or lack of it. For now, you're still here, heart-heavy, learning to navigate a marriage where your wants don't matter. You're trudging through the village now a week into marriage, the weight of your husband's expectations still pressing on you like a too-tight kirtle. The air's crisp, scented with damp earth and baking bread, but your mind's elsewhere. You're not just a wife, you're a shadow. Your voice buried under layers of custom and duty. The medieval world doesn't care what you think or feel about your marriage, and speaking up feels like shouting into a void. You clutch a basket of turnips, your knuckles white, and realize your silence is another trap, one that's been tightening since the betrothal. Welcome to a life where your words barely matter. Women's lack of agency in medieval marriage was systemic, woven into law, religion, and culture. By the 13th century, both secular and ecclesiastical courts across Europe upheld a husband's authority, leaving wives with little legal say. Your marriage was decided by others, father, lord, or priest, and your role is to obey, not question. Voicing dissent could mean accusations of defiance, a sin in the church's eyes, and a crime in your husband's. A mainstream fact in England, the 1290 legal treatise Fleta stated, wives were under their husband's rod, meaning your opinions were irrelevant unless they aligned with his. You're not a partner, you're a subject. You pause by the well, the bucket's rope creaking as you draw water. Your husband's at the fields, but his rules linger. He told you to stay quiet at last night's feast to avoid embarrassing him with chatter. You wanted to share a story, maybe make the table laugh, but you bit your tongue. It's not just him. Society expects your silence. If you're noble, you're a decorative prop, speaking only to flatter allies. If you're a peasant, your words are drowned by work, cooking, weaving, child-rearing. Either way, opening your mouth risks trouble. Here's a quirky tidbit in some German towns. Women who spoke out of turn at gatherings were fined their words, literally taxed. Joke 1, imagine getting a bill for saying the stew's too salty. The silence isn't just social, it's structural. You had no say in the betrothal, no veto on the dowry, no choice in the wedding night's demands. Now, as a wife, your input's limited to household tasks, and even then, he has the final word. You suggested planting barley instead of rye this year, but he dismissed you with a grunt. You're supposed to accept it to nod and smile like the priest's sermons urge. But the frustration's a slow burn, like a candle wick you can't snuff out. Historians still argue whether women found subtle ways to influence decisions, with some claiming noble wives swayed husbands through charm or piety. You're not feeling influential, though just invisible. You heft the bucket water sloshing and head home. The village is busy, women like you moving in quiet rhythm, their faces mirroring your own resignation. You've seen what happens to those who speak out. Your cousin married 2 villages, over-argued with her husband about selling their cow. He slapped her in front of the neighbors, and the priest blamed her for provoking him. The lesson's clear, your voice is a liability. The church preaches submission, citing Eve's sin as proof women should stay quiet. You're starting to hate those sermons, but skipping church isn't an option. Joke 2, maybe you could accidentally doze off during the obedience bit. It's not just about big decisions. Even small choices what to cook, how to dress are his to approve. You wanted to wear your green kirtle to the market, but he said it was too bold. You complied, but the sting lingers. The bedchamber's no different. Remember his expectations from last section. You can't say no to his demands, not without risking shame or worse. The conjugal debt doctrine traps you, and voicing discomfort could make him angry. You're learning to bury your feelings to perform contentment even when you're crumbling inside. Here's a fringe fact in some Italian courts. Wives who complained about their husband's treatment were labeled scolds and paraded in a cage. Silence feels safer. You set the bucket down, your arms aching. The hut's dim, the dowry chest still looming like a reminder of your price. You think of your mother, who rarely spoke against your father. She warned you to choose your battles, but what battles can you fight when the rules are stacked against you? You're not just voiceless in marriage, you're voiceless in the world. If you're noble, your lord or king can override your wishes. If you're a peasant, the village elders hold sway. Every layer of power silences you, and the weight's crushing. But there's a flicker of defiance buried deep. You've heard whispers of women who found ways to be heard not loudly, but cleverly. A noble woman might sway her husband through flattery. A peasant might barter with neighbors to gain allies. You're not there yet, but the idea's a spark. You think of Marjorie Kemp, whose memoirs broke the mold by voicing her struggles, even if it made her a target. She spoke and people listened, though not always kindly. You're not Marjorie, but her story's a reminder that silence isn't eternal. Joke 3. Maybe you could start a secret wives' complaint club behind the barn. You're starting to see the full trap. The betrothal stole your choice. The dowry priced you. The virginity test judged you. The consummation bound you. The bedchamber's politics used you. And his expectations chained you. Now, your voicelessness seals it, making you a ghost in your own life. You're not just a wife. You're a role, a function, a shadow of what you could be. The next trap's waiting, and it's darker. The reality of child brides younger than you face in this nightmare. For now, you're still here, stirring the fire, your unspoken thoughts, the only rebellion you can afford. You're sitting by the hearth in your hut. The fire's glow casting shadows that dance, like the fears you've carried since the wedding. The village outside is quiet, save for the occasional bark of a dog. But your thoughts are loud, drifting to girls younger than you children, really facing the same marriage trap. You're barely 15 yet. You're considered lucky. Some brides are far younger, thrust into this world of betrothals, dowries, and bedchambers before they understand it. You stir the embers, the smell of ash sharp in your nose, and feel a chill that's not from the night air. The plight of child brides is a grim reality, and it's haunting you now. Child marriage was common in medieval Europe, driven by economic and political needs. Historians note that by the 12th century, canon law set the minimum marriage age at 12 for girls, but loopholes and custom often ignored this. Noble families married off daughters as young as 7 to secure alliances, while peasants used early betrothals to ease financial burdens. These girls weren't just promised, they were often wed and expected to fulfill wifely duties, including consummation, far too soon. A mainstream fact in 1396, Isabel of France, aged 6, was married to England's Richard II, though consummation was delayed. Most child brides weren't so lucky. You imagine a girl maybe 10 standing in a church, her small hands trembling as she's bound to a man old enough to be her father. Her dowry's meager a few chickens, a patched quilt, but it's enough to seal the deal. She doesn't grasp what's happening, only that her parents are relieved their debts lighter. You've seen this in your village, a neighbor's daughter. Levin wed last spring to a widower needing a new wife. Her eyes were blank, her voice gone just like yours feels now. Here's a quirky tidbit in some regions. Child brides were given bridal dolls to ease the transition, a creepy attempt to soften a brutal reality. Joke 1. Imagine a doll that comes with a tiny dowry chest for authenticity. The horror's not just the wedding. These girls face the bedchamber's demands. Remember that creaky mattress and nosy guests. For a child, it's not just terrifying, it's traumatic. The church might delay consummation for noble girls until puberty, but peasants often had no such grace. You've heard whispers of girls bleeding crying, or worse, their bodies unready for what's forced on them. The conjugal debt doctrine doesn't care about age. A wife owes her husband, period. Historians still argue whether child marriages were seen as normal or quietly pitied, with some claiming communities turned a blind eye to protect the system. You're not sure anyone cared enough to pity. You shift the hearth's warmth, doing little to ease the cold knot in your chest. These girls aren't just losing childhood, they're losing safety. A child bride's expected to meet her husband's demands just like you, but she's got less strength to cope. If she's noble, she's a pawn in dynastic games, her fertility a gamble for heirs. If she's a peasant, she's labor cooking, cleaning, bearing children before she's grown. You think of a girl from the next village, wed at 9, now pregnant at 12. Her mother's pride masks a grim truth: she might not survive childbirth. The risk's real. Medieval medicine's a roll of the dice. The village expects these girls to play the role, silent, obedient, fertile. Remember your own voicelessness. It's worse for them. They can't negotiate, can't charm, can't even understand the expectations crushing them. Their bodies are judged like yours. Virginity consummation heirs, but they're too young to navigate the scrutiny. You've seen their blank stares at market, their small frames hunched under workloads meant for adults. And here's a fringe fact. In some Italian cities, child brides were fostered in their husband's home before the wedding, raised like servants until ready. It's less fostering, more grooming, and it makes your skin crawl. You toss a log on the fire, sparks flaring like your anger. The system's merciless. Parents justify it. Poverty alliances, survival. But it's betrayal. A child bride's dowry, often smaller than yours, still prices her like livestock. Her betrothal's a trap, her wedding night, a violation, her marriage, a theft of years. She'll never get back. You think of your younger sister, just 8, already eyed by a neighbor for a future match. You want to scream, but who'd listen? The church blesses these unions. The village accepts them, and the law allows them. Resistance feels like spitting into the wind. The worst part, these girls face the same power plays you do bedchamber politics, husband's expectations, but with less agency. A 12-year-old can't sway her lord or outsmart her in-laws. She's a child in a woman's role, judged as harshly as you for failing to conceive or please. You've heard of girls punished for disobedience, their youth no shield against a husband's fist. The fear's a constant, and they've got no Marjorie Kempe to inspire them. She was grown when she wrote her struggles. These girls are alone. Their voices, not just silenced, but unborn. You stand pacing the hut, the floorboards creaking under your weight. You're starting to see the full cruelty of this world. your betrothal dowry virginity test, consummation, bedchamber politics, husband's demands, and voicelessness were heavy, but you're old enough to grasp them. Child brides aren't. They're thrown into the same machine their bodies and futures ground up for profit. You think of that 11-year-old bride, her blank eyes haunting you. She's you, but smaller, softer, with no chance to fight back. Joke too, maybe she could bribe the village cat to trip her groom, but cats don't take bribes. The fire's dying, and you feel a hollow ache. The system's not just rigged, it's ravenous, devouring girls before they're women. You're angry, but anger's a luxury. You've got to survive your own marriage first. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the church's iron grip, sanctifying this madness. For now, you're still here, the embers fading, your heart heavy with the weight of girls too young to carry it. Joke 3, maybe you could smuggle them a how to survive marriage scroll, but parchment's hard to come by. You're kneeling in the village church, the stone floor biting through your thin kirtle, the scent of incense and mildew thick in the air. It's a week since your wedding, and the priest's droning about obedience, his words, a hammer on your already bruised spirit. The church isn't just a building, it's the iron grip clamping down on your marriage, your body, and your fears. It shapes every trap you've faced from the betrothal to the bedchamber. And it's why those child brides from last night's thoughts are suffering. You clasp your hands, the rough pew creaking, and feel the weight of a system that calls this suffering holy. The church's dominance over medieval marriage was absolute, its rules codified by the 12th century under canon law. Marriage was a sacrament, not a choice, and the church controlled its terms, betrothals, dowries, consummation, all sanctified to serve God's order. Your role as a wife is to submit, procreate, and uphold the sacred bond, no matter how it feels. The church's teachings, rooted in figures like St. Augustine, framed women as helpmates, their desires secondary to men's. A mainstream fact, the 1215 Fourth Lateran Council required public bans before weddings, ensuring the church's oversight of every union. Your life's a contract, and they're the notaries. You shift your knees aching and glance at the altar. The priest's sermon feels personal, urging wives to honor their husbands. You're supposed to nod, but it's hard when the church's rules justify your silence, your husband's demands, even the child bride's plight. It sanctified your betrothal, blessed the dowry, and demanded your virginity. Remember that white shift. Now it's enforcing your marital duties, preaching that refusal is a sin. The conjugal debt doctrine, a church favorite, says you owe your husband your body, no exceptions. You've heard of women hauled to ecclesiastical courts for resisting their shame paraded before the village. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests kept sin registers, noting wives who defied their husbands like a medieval naughty list. Joke 1, imagine your name scribbled next to forgot to smile at his bad joke. The church's grip isn't just about sex, it's about control. It decides what makes a marriage valid from consummation to intent, and it's why your wedding night was a public affair. If you fail to perform, the church could annul the marriage, sending you back to your family in disgrace, your dowry half gone. You think of a girl from a nearby village, her marriage voided because her husband claimed she resisted. The priest sided with him, and she's now a spinster shunned. Historians still argue whether the church protected women by regulating marriage or trapped them by enforcing submission, with some claiming it offered legal recourse for abused wives. You're not seeing much recourse, just rules that bind you tighter. You bow your head, the priest's voice echoing. The church's power goes beyond the bedchamber. It shapes how you're seen as a vessel for heirs, a servant to your husband, a symbol of virtue. It's why child brides are wed with blessings, their youth ignored in the name of alliances. It's why your voicelessness feels holy, your silence a sign of piety. The church preaches that suffering's noble, citing Mary's humility, but it feels like a cage. You're supposed to pray for strength, but you're praying for escape, even if you'd never admit it. Joke 2. Maybe you could pray for a divine loophole, like a no husband's clause. The village depends on the church, its rituals woven into every birth, death, and marriage. You can't defy it without risking your soul or your place in the community. Excommunication's a real threat, cutting you off from sacraments and society. You've seen it happen. A woman who questioned her husband's cruelty was branded a heretic, her name Mud. The church's grip is spiritual, and social making rebellion unthinkable. And here's a fringe fact. In some Spanish dioceses, priests performed purification rites for brides after consummation, cleansing them of sinful intimacy, even in marriage. It's less about purity, more about reminding you who's boss. You rise as the service ends, your legs stiff. The other women file out their faces blank, and you wonder if they feel the same weight. The church's rules aren't just words, they're the scaffolding of your life, holding up the betrothal dowry virginity test, consummation, bedchamber politics, husband's expectations in your silence. It's why those child brides are trapped. Their suffering blessed as God's will. You think of your sister still young, her future already in the church's hands. You want to protect her, but the priest's watching, and defiance isn't an option. The worst part. The church offers no mercy for your fears. It tells you to endure, to see your pain as a path to salvation. You're supposed to find joy in submission, but joy's a stranger. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose memoirs wrestled with faith and marriage. She challenged the church's grip, but paid a price mockery suspicion. You're not ready for that fight, not when every sermon reminds you to stay in line. The system's a monolith, and you're just one woman kneeling under its shadow. You step outside the noon sun, harsh after the church's gloom. The village hums children playing, men bartering, but you feel apart, your thoughts tangled in doctrine. The church's grip isn't just about now. It's eternal, promising heaven if you obey, hell if you don't. It's why you're still playing the wife, smiling at your husband, swallowing your voice. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the superstitions that twist your wedding night into something even stranger. For now, you're still here. The priest's words echoing your heart, heavy with a faith that feels like chains. Joke 3. Maybe you could slip a please, cancel marriage note into the offering plate. But miracles are scarce. You're back in that bedchamber a month into marriage, the straw mattress now familiar, but no less uncomfortable. The village is asleep, but you're wide awake. The moon's light slipping through the shutters, casting eerie shapes on the wall. Your husband snoring softly, oblivious to the dread that's crept back into your heart. It's not just his expectations, or the church's grip keeping you up. It's the superstitions swirling around your wedding night, and every night since. Medieval life is steeped in omens and rituals, and the bedchamber's a hotspot for bizarre beliefs that make your role as a wife even stranger. You pull the blanket close, the air sharp with the scent of damp wool and fear and brace for the shadows of folklore that haunt you. Superstitions shaped medieval marriage, blending pagan traditions with Christian rites. By the 14th century, communities across Europe clung to rituals to ward off evil spirits, ensure fertility, or secure a husband's loyalty. Your wedding night wasn't just a contract, it was a battleground against unseen forces, and you were expected to play your part in bizarre, often humiliating ways. A mainstream fact in England, the 1371 Book of Hours, included prayers for brides to protect against demonic interference during consummation, showing how deeply fear of the supernatural permeated marriage. Every creak of the bed feels like a warning, and you're not sure what's worse, the spirits or the rituals meant to stop them. You glance at the corner where a sprig of rosemary, remember that charm from the first night, hangs by the door. It's supposed to keep evil at bay, but it's a flimsy defense. On your wedding night, your mother pressed it into your hand, whispering about spirits that could curse the marriage. You didn't argue, but the memory makes you shiver. Superstitions weren't optional. They were law enforced by village elders, and even priests who mixed faith with folklore. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some French villages, brides walked backward into the bedchamber to confuse malevolent spirits, a clumsy ritual that left you tripping over your shift. Joke 1, imagine face planting into the mattress and blaming a demon for bad coordination. The rituals didn't stop at the door. You were told to scatter salt on the bed to purify it, a task that felt silly until you saw your mother-in-law's stern nod. Salt was precious, but so was a clean marriage. Some believed spirits could steal your fertility or make your husband stray, so every precaution mattered. You've heard of brides who forgot a ritual and were blamed for miscarriages or bad harvests. Superstition's a scapegoat when logic fails. Historians still argue whether these beliefs empowered women by giving them ritual roles or just piled on more pressure, with some claiming peasants leaned harder on folklore than nobles. You're feeling the pressure, not the power, as every night's a test of your purity against invisible foes. You shift the bed, creaking, and your husband stirs. He's not immune either. He muttered about a charm under his pillow, a knotted cord to bind your love. It's less romantic, more desperate a reminder that he's also caught in this web of fear. The bedchamber's a stage for rituals that go beyond consummation. You've been told to sleep on your right side to ensure a son, to avoid moonlight on the bed, lest it chill your womb. These rules are exhausting, and failing them could mark you as cursed. You think of a neighbor shunned after her child was stillborn, whispers claiming she'd skipped a protective chant. Joke 2, maybe you could chant, "Please, no more rituals," and call it a day. The church, for all its grip, didn't stamp out these beliefs, it absorbed them. Priests blessed beds, but villagers added their own safeguards, like tying bells to the bed frame to scare off spirits. You did it, the bell's faint jingle, a constant reminder of eyes, human and otherwise, watching you. And here's a fringe fact. In parts of Germany, brides drank a fertility tonic of herbs and wine before the wedding night, believed to ward off barrenness, but tasting like swamp water. You choked it down, praying it worked, because failure's not just personal, it's cosmic. A barren wife could be seen as hexed, her marriage a bad omen. You stare at the ceiling, counting cracks to calm your nerves. Superstitions don't just rule the bedchamber, they follow you. If you conceive, you'll face more rituals, wearing amulets, avoiding certain foods, even shunning unlucky neighbors. If you don't, the village might whisper about curses, not biology. You've seen it happen. Your cousin's sister-in-law, childless after 2 years, was forced to wear a cleansing charm publicly, her shame a village spectacle. The fears, a knot in your gut, tying you to that dowry, that virginity test, that consummation. Every trap's laced with superstition, making you a pawn in a game of spirits and signs. You're starting to see how deep this runs. The betrothal, dowry, virginity, consummation, bedchamber politics, husband's expectations, your silence, child brides, and the church's rules, all are tangled in folklore that turns your life into a ritual. You're not just a wife. You're a ward against chaos, your every move a spell to keep the world in order. You think of Marjorie Kemp, whose memoirs hinted at wrestling with these fears, her piety clashing with village superstitions. If she struggled, what chance do you have? Resistance feels futile when even the air feels haunted. You pull the blanket tighter, the bells jingling faintly. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the pressure to produce heirs, another layer of expectation that's anything but natural. For now, you're still here. The moon's light fading your heart heavy with the weight of rituals you can't escape. Joke 3. Maybe you could bribe the spirits with a spare turnip, but they'd probably demand your dowry instead. You're standing in the doorway of your hut, the morning sun barely cutting through the mist, the village stirring with the clatter of buckets and lowing cows. It's been a few months since your wedding, and the bedchamber's rituals, those bells and rosemary sprigs, still linger like a bad dream. But now, a new weight settled on you, heavier than your husband's expectations, or the church's grip, the pressure to produce heirs. Every glance from your in-laws, every whisper at the market reminds you that your worth hinges on a child, preferably a son. You grip the door frame, the wood rough under your fingers, the air sharp with dew and dread. This isn't just about motherhood. It's about survival in a world that measures you by your womb. Producing heirs was a cornerstone of medieval marriage, tying families' lands and futures together. Historians note that by the 13th century, both noble and peasant marriages hinged on children to secure inheritance and labor. For nobles, a son meant a dynasty's survival. For peasants, it meant hands to work the fields. Failure to conceive wasn't just personal. It was a breach of contract, threatening the dowry, the alliance, even your place in the household. A mainstream fact, in 1328, the English crown's succession crisis after Edward II's death showed how vital heirs were, with disputes over childless marriages sparking political chaos. Your body's a battlefield, and the stakes are merciless. You step outside the mud sucking at your shoes. Your mother-in-law's already at the well, her eyes flicking to your flat belly with a mix of hope and judgment. You haven't conceived yet, and the silence is loud. The village expects results fast. You're supposed to be pregnant by now, proving the marriage's success from that first night's consummation. If you're noble, your child could inherit titles. If a peasant, they'll share the workload. Either way, delay's a red flag. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some German villages, newlyweds were fed fertility foods like eggs and honey for weeks after the wedding, a not-so-subtle nudge to get busy. Joke 1, imagine choking down sticky porridge while your in-laws chant "make a baby." The pressure's not just social, it's physical. You're terrified of what pregnancy means in a world where childbirth's a gamble. You've seen women die, their bodies broken by labor, their babies lost too. Yet barrenness is worse, socially at least. A childless wife risks blame, even divorce. Her dowry clawed back like a bad investment. You think of a woman from the next village, cast out after 3 years without a child, her husband claiming she was cursed. The church might mediate, but it sides with heirs over empathy. Historians still argue whether fertility pressure empowered women as mothers, or reduced them to vessels, with some saying noble women gained status through sons. You're not feeling status, just fear. You trudge to the garden pulling weeds to keep your hands busy. Your husband's been kinder lately, but his patience has an edge. He wants a son, and every night's a reminder of that goal. The conjugal debt doctrine, thanks church, means you can't refuse, even when you're exhausted. You've tried the superstition sleeping on your right side, wearing a knotted cord under your shift. Nothing's worked, and the village is starting to talk. You've heard whispers at church, women clucking about barren brides, as if it's your fault. Joke too, maybe you could blame the moon for chilling your womb and dodge the gossip. The fear's deeper, because it's not just about you. Your child will tie your family to his, cementing the betrothal's alliance and justifying the dowry's cost. No heir, and the deal weakens families. Feud lands disputed. If you're noble, a son could mean peace between lords. If peasant, he's insurance against starvation. You're not just failing your husband, you're failing everyone. And here's a fringe fact. In some Italian towns, childless wives were sent to fertility shrines, forced to pray barefoot in public, their shame a spectacle. You'd rather hide in the woods than face that humiliation. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow. Your sister-in-law, pregnant with her second, brags about her blessing, her smugness, a knife. You want to scream that it's not a choice, but silence is safer. Remember your voicelessness. The church preaches that children are God's will, so barrenness feels like divine judgment. You pray nightly, but doubt creeps in. You think of your friend, married a year, who miscarried and faced her husband's coldness. She warned you to act fertile, whatever that means. The pressure's a noose tightening with every passing month. The village's obsession doesn't help. Neighbors ask prying questions. When's the baby coming? Are you eating enough oats? Their advice is endless. Drink. Nettle. Tea. Avoid cats. Wear an amulet. You've tried it, all the amulets wait. A constant reminder of failure. Superstitions pile on each one, a new rule to follow. You're not just a wife, you're a walking incubator. Your body scrutinized like that virginity test years ago. The bedchamber's no sanctuary. It's a workshop where you're expected to produce night after night. You're starting to see the full trap. The betrothal promised you, the dowry priced you. The virginity test judged you. The consummation bound you. The bedchamber's politics used you. Your husband's demands chained you. Your silence buried you. Child brides shocked you. The church controlled you, and superstitions haunted you. Now fertility's the final measure, and you're failing by default. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose 14 children didn't spare her marital struggles. If she couldn't escape this pressure, what hope do you have? Resistance feels pointless when your body's the battleground. You head back to the hut, the basket of weeds heavy in your arms. Your husband's home soon, and you'll face another night of expectation. You're not just a wife. You're a vessel, a hope, a deadline. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the conjugal debt that makes your body his property. For now, you're still here. The mist fading your heart, heavy with a pressure you can't outrun. Joke 3. Maybe you could bribe the village midwife to fake a pregnancy glow. but she'd probably demand your best hen. You're sitting at the rough-hewn table in your hut, the evening shadows stretching long across the dirt floor, the faint smell of barley stew clinging to the air. It's been months since your wedding, and the pressure to produce an heir still gnaws at you. But now, another chain tightens the doctrine of conjugal debt. Your husband's boots are by the door, a reminder he'll be back soon expecting you to fulfill your duty in the bedchamber. The church's rules, those superstitions, and his demands all converge here in a concept that makes your body his by divine decree. You trace a crack in the table, your heart thudding, and brace for a truth that strips away what little control you thought you had. The conjugal debt doctrine was a medieval cornerstone, rooted in church teachings from the 12th century onward. Based on St. Paul's letters, it declared that spouses owed each other their bodies for intimacy, a mutual obligation in theory, but lopsided in practice. Refusal was a sin punishable by ecclesiastical courts, and women bore the brunt. Your husband can demand you at any time, and saying no risks shame, punishment, or accusations of defying God. A mainstream fact in 1298, the decretals of Pope Boniface Owen reinforced this doctrine, making it a legal and spiritual mandate across Christendom. Your bedchamber's no sanctuary. It's a courtroom where you're always on trial. You stand pacing to the window, the night air cool against your face. He'll be home soon, and you know what he'll want. The doctrine's not just a rule, it's a weapon. He's been taught you're his by right, a belief backed by priests and village elders. You've tried to dodge it, feigning illness, staying up late, but excuses wear thin. Last week you hesitated, and his scowl was a warning. You've heard of wives dragged to church for denying their husbands their penance, public humiliation. Here's a quirky tidbit in some English parishes. Priests preached debt sermons after weddings, reminding couples to pay regularly like a divine tax collector. Joke 1. Imagine a priest with a ledger tallying your bedchamber debts next to your tithes. The doctrine's cruelty lies in its inflexibility. You're exhausted, hauling water, tending crops, dodging fertility gossip, but your fatigue doesn't matter. The church says your body's his, just as his is yours, but that's a hollow promise. If you demanded him, he'd laugh, or worse. Men's debt was rarely enforced. You're trapped, your silence from those earlier days now a gag. You think of your friend, married a year, who whispered about faking enthusiasm to avoid trouble. She called it survival, but it feels like surrender. Historians still argue whether conjugal debt gave women any leverage. Some claim it offered rare grounds for annulment if husbands refused, but you are not seeing leverage, just obligation. You light a tallow candle, its flicker casting jittery shadows. The bedchamber looms, that creaky mattress, a symbol of every trap, the betrothal's promise, the dowry's price, the virginity test's judgment, the consummation's proof, the politics' stakes, his expectations, your voicelessness, child bride's horror, the church's grip, superstition's weight, and fertility's pressure. The doctrine ties them together, making your body a debt you can't escape. You're supposed to render willingly, but willingness is a luxury you don't have. Joke 2, maybe you could pay him with a heartfelt poem about turnips, but he'd probably demand a refund. The village reinforces this. Neighbors gossip about dutiful wives praising those who conceive quickly, implying they paid well. Barrenness, like yours, so far invites suspicion. Maybe you're shirking your debt. You've overheard the baker's wife clucking about a woman who refused her husband and lost her dowry in a church dispute. The fear's a constant, like the ache in your shoulders from carrying water. And here's a fringe fact in some Italian dioceses' wives who consistently refused were ordered to wear penance shifts in church, a public mark of their sin. You'd rather swallow your pride than face that shame. You hear his footsteps outside, heavy and deliberate. Your stomach knots, but you force a smile as he enters. He's not cruel, not always, but he's shaped by a world that sees you as his due. The doctrine's not just about intimacy, it's about power. It justifies his control from what you cook to how you act in bed. You've learned to perform to hide your fear, but each night chips away at you. You think of your aunt, married a decade, who hinted at enduring for the children. She warned you to keep peace, but peace feels like erasure. The worst part, the church frames this as holy. Sermons call the debt a sacred bond, uniting you in God's plan. But it's hard to feel sacred when you're trembling, counting cracks in the ceiling to get through the night. You pray for strength, but the church's answer is submission, not solace. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose memoirs railed against marital duties, her faith clashing with her reality. She fought back by turning to mysticism. But you are no mystic, just a wife, caught in a doctrine that sanctifies your surrender. You're starting to see the full scope of this trap. Every step, betrothal, dowry, virginity, consummation, politics, expectations, silence, child brides, church rules, superstitions. Fertility leads to this. Your body as a debt owed to a man, a village, a god you're struggling to trust. You're not just a wife, you're a currency spent nightly to keep the system running. The next trap's waiting, and it's darker. The risk of violence that haunts every refusal. For now, you're still here. The candle burning low. Your heart heavy with a debt you never chose to owe. Joke 3. Maybe you could negotiate a debt holiday with the priest, but he'd probably excommunicate you for asking. You're hunched over a wooden bucket in the yard, scrubbing linens under a gray dawn sky, the cold water numbing your fingers. The village is waking. Smoke curls from chimneys. A rooster crows. But your mind's stuck on last night. Your husband's demands, backed by that conjugal debt doctrine, left you shaken. And now, a darker fear creeps in, the risk of violence if you falter. The bedchamber's no longer just a place of obligation. It's a tightrope, where one wrong step could bring pain. You scrub harder, the lie stinging your skin, the air sharp with frost and dread. In this world, your body's not just owed, it's vulnerable, and the threat's as real as the mud under your feet. Violence against wives was a grim reality in medieval Europe, often tacitly accepted within the bounds of discipline. Historians note that by the 13th century, legal codes like England's Bracton allowed husbands to correct their wives with moderate force, a vague term that left women exposed. Refusing conjugal duties, speaking out, or failing to please could provoke a husband's wrath, and society rarely intervened. Your role is to endure, but endurance has limits, and the fear of a raised hand, or worse, shadows every interaction. A mainstream fact in 1307 London court records show a wife fined for provoking her husband's abuse, proof the system blamed women for their own suffering. You wring out a cloth, your knuckles raw. Last night, you hesitated when he reached for you, exhaustion winning over duty. His voice sharpened, and for a moment, you saw a flash in his eyes that made your heart race. He didn't strike you, but the possibility hung there, heavy as the bucket at your feet. You've seen it happen. Your neighbor married 2 years. Hides bruises under her shawl. Her husband's temper, a village secret nobody dares name. Here's a quirky tidbit in some French villages. Husbands who overcorrected their wives were mocked with charivari, a noisy public shaming. But it was rare, and more about community pride than justice. Joke 1, imagine the village banging pots to say, "Beat her less next time." The risk's not just in the bedchamber. Any misstep, burnt stew, a sharp word, a barren womb could spark his anger. The conjugal debt doctrine makes refusal a sin, but resisting his demands feels like inviting trouble. You've heard of wives beaten for denying their husbands their cries, ignored by neighbors who shrug it off as household business. The church preaches patience, urging you to suffer silently, but it's hard when your body's the target. Historians still argue whether violence was widespread or exaggerated in records, with some claiming noble women faced less physical abuse due to their status. You're no noble, and the fear feels universal, a shared secret among the women at the well. You stand stretching your aching back and glance at the hut. He's out in the fields, but his presence lingers. The village expects you to keep him happy, tying back to that fertility pressure and bedchamber politics. If you fail, no heirs, no harmony, his frustration could turn physical. You think of your cousin, whose husband broke her arm after she argued about selling their goat. She was blamed for provoking him, her dowry nearly reclaimed. The law's no help. Courts favor men, and priests counsel submission. You're trapped, your silence from those earlier days now a shield against worse. Joke 2, maybe you could accidentally trip him into the pig pen to even the score. But pigs don't solve grudges. The fear's worse because it's unpredictable. He's not always harsh. Sometimes he's kind, sharing a laugh over supper. But the doctrine, the church, and the village give him power to lash out without consequence. You've learned to read his moods, to tiptoe around his temper, but it's exhausting. And here's a fringe fact. In some Spanish regions, wives accused of disobedience were forced to wear shame veils, in public marking them as troublemakers, before violence even struck. The threat's a specter following you from bedchamber to market, a reminder that your body's not yours. You carry the bucket inside the linens dripping. The hut's dim, the dowry chest still a silent judge of your worth. You think of your mother, who bore her husband's occasional slaps with a tight-lipped smile. She warned you to bend, not break, but bending feels like breaking some days. The church's sermons remember that priests drone call suffering holy, but it's hard to feel holy when you're flinching at footsteps. You pray for peace, but peace means pleasing him, and pleasing him means risking yourself. You're not just a wife, you're a survivor navigating a minefield where love and fear blur. The village doesn't see your fear. Women gossip about good wives who keep their husbands calm, implying you're failing if he's angry. You've overheard them at church, praising a woman whose husband only yells. The system's rigged to keep you in line, tying every trap together. Betrothal's promise, dowry's price, virginity's test, consummation's proof, politics, stakes, expectations, chains, silence is gag, child brides is horror, church's rules, superstitions, weight, fertility's burden, and conjugal debt's claim. Violence is the final enforcer, a shadow that keeps you obedient. You think of Marjorie Kempa, whose memoirs hinted at enduring her husband's roughness. If she, bold and devout, feared this, what chance do you have? You set the bucket down your arms, trembling. He'll be home soon. and you'll face another night of tiptoeing, balancing duty and self-preservation. You're learning to hide your fear, to smile through the dread, but it's a performance that's wearing you thin. The next trap's waiting, and it's about widows forced back into this nightmare through remarriage. For now, you're still here. The dawn fading your heart heavy with a fear you can't outrun. Joke 3, maybe you could train the village rooster to crow at his temper, but roosters aren't great bodyguards. You're weaving by the hearth, the shuttle's rhythm a faint comfort against the evening's chill, the hut filled with the scent of burning oak and stale bread. It's been nearly a year since your wedding, and the fear of violence still lingers, a shadow cast by your husband's temper and that conjugal debt. But now your thoughts drift to women who've escaped this trap, widows only to be dragged back into it through remarriage. The village whispers about a widow down the lane, her first husband. Dead, now betrothed again. You pause the loom, creaking, and feel a pang for her. Widowhood might seem like freedom, but remarriage is a new kind of terror, pulling women back into the same machine you're caught in. Widows in medieval Europe faced intense pressure to remarry, driven by economic and social forces. Historians note that by the 14th century, both church and secular laws encouraged remarriage to ensure women remained under male protection. A widow's independence was fleeting. Her dowry land or labor made her a prize, and families' lords, or even the church, pushed her back to the altar. Remarriage meant re-entering the cycle of betrothals, bedchambers, and expectations, often with worse odds. A mainstream fact in 1350s Florence city records show over 60% of widows under 40 remarried within 2 years, often to secure financial stability or appease kin. You're not a widow, but the thought of starting over makes your stomach knot. You set the shuttle down, the fire's glow flickering on the walls. That widow, Agnes, is in her 30s, her first marriage, a decade of toil, and 3 children. Her husband's death left her a small plot, but her lord demanded she remarry to keep it. Now, she's pledged to a man with a sour reputation, his eyes more on her land than her heart. You've seen her at market, her face drawn, and you know she's dreading the same traps. You've faced the dowry's price, the bedchamber's demands, the church's rules. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some English villages, widows wore mourning rings that doubled as betrothal tokens, a grim reminder that grief was no excuse to stay single. Joke 1, imagine a ring that says, "Sorry for your loss, now get hitched." The terror of remarriage isn't just repetition, it's the baggage. Agnes carries scars from her first husband's temper, like those you fear. A new husband might be worse. His expectations harsher because she's used goods. If she has children, they're leverage. Her new groom could mistreat them to control her or demand she prioritize his heirs. You've heard of stepchildren cast out, their mother powerless. The conjugal debt applies again, and an older widow's body worn by childbirth or labor faces scrutiny anew. Historians still argue whether remarriage offered widows security or just traded one cage for another, with some claiming wealthy widows had more choice. Agnes isn't wealthy, and her dread mirrors yours. You stoke the fire sparks flaring like your unease. Widows like Agnes face the same bedchamber politics you do, but with less illusion of romance. A second husband might see her as a servant, her dowry a quick grab. If she's noble, her remarriage could shift alliances like Joan of Kent's 1361 marriage to the Black Prince, which stirred court rivalries. If a peasant like Agnes, It's about labor and land. Either way, the bedchamber's a battlefield again, her body a tool for his gain. You think of your aunt, widowed young, who remarried a man who squandered her dowry. She warned you to guard your heart, but hearts don't survive this system. Joke 2, maybe she could have hidden her dowry in a haystack, but he'd probably sniff it out. The village piles on. Widows who resist remarriage are labeled selfish or unnatural, their independence a threat. You've overheard women at church gossiping about a widow who refused a match and lost her home to her Lord's wrath. The church preaches remarriage as a woman's duty, citing biblical widows like Ruth, but it feels like another chain. Superstitions add pressure. Some believe a widow who stays single brings bad luck, her unbound status a curse. Agnes wore a charm to cleanse her widowhood, but it didn't stop the betrothal. And here's a fringe fact: in some German towns, widows faced remarriage taxes if they delayed too long, a literal price for freedom. You'd laugh if it weren't so cruel. You resume weaving the threads tangling like your thoughts. Agnes's new wedding night looms a repeat of your own consummation scrutiny, the risk of violence. She's older, wiser, but no less trapped. Her voice, like yours, is silenced. Her choice, like child brides, is stolen. The church's grip, those fertility demands, and the conjugal debt all reset, as if her first marriage taught her nothing but endurance. You're not a widow, but you feel her fear, knowing you could be her one day. The system's relentless, chewing up women, whether they're 12 or 40. You're starting to see the full cycle. Betrothal trapped you. Dowry priced. You virginity. Judged you. Consummation. Bound. You. Politics. Used. You expectations. Chained you. Silence. Gagged you. Child brides shocked you. Church controlled you. Superstitions haunted you. Fertility burdened you. Conjugal debt claimed you, and violence threatened you. Widows like Agnes prove there's no escape, just a new round of the same game. You think of Marjorie Kemp, who outlived her husband, but still wrestled with society's chains. If she couldn't break free, what hope does Agnes have? Or you set the loom aside the fire, dying to embers. Your husband's due back, and you'll face another night of duty, the fear of his temper ever present. Agnes's remarriage is a warning. This world doesn't let women rest. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the stark differences between peasant and noble brides, a divide that shapes their terrors. For now, you're still here. The shadows deepening your heart, heavy with a cycle that spares no one. Joke 3, maybe you could convince Agnes to run off with the village goats, but goats make lousy rebels. You're trudging along a muddy path to the village market, a basket of eggs balanced on your hip. The late morning air thick with the scent of damp hay and baking bread. It's been over a year since your wedding, and the widow's remarriage still haunts you. A reminder that escape from this marriage trap is a mirage. But now your thoughts shift to the divide between women, like you peasants scraping by, and the noble brides in their stone castles. The market's buzzing with both peasant wives, haggling over turnips, noble women gliding past in velvet, their lives seemingly worlds apart. You adjust your coarse kirtle, the eggs rattling, and wonder if their wedding nights were as terrifying as yours. Spoiler, they were just in different ways. Class-shaped medieval marriage profoundly, with peasant and noble brides facing distinct but equally oppressive pressures. Historians note that by the 14th century, marriage was a universal institution, but its stakes varied. Noble women were pawns in dynastic games, their unions forging alliances or wars, while peasant women like you were were tied to labor and survival. Both faced betrothals, dowries, and bedchamber demands, but the trappings and terrors differed. A mainstream fact in 1363. Blanche of Lancaster's marriage to John of Gaunt secured the English crown's wealth, showing how noble brides carried political weight peasants couldn't imagine. Yet your fears, violence, silence, fertility echo theirs just in a muddier setting. You pause by a stall, eyeing a noblewoman's embroidered veil as she buys spices. Her wedding night, you've heard, was a spectacle. Silk sheets, not straw. Minstrels, not drunken neighbors. But the pressure was no less crushing. Noble brides faced intense scrutiny to prove virginity and produce heirs, their bedchambers a stage for lords and courtiers. You remember your own night-creaky mattress, nosy guests, but at least your shame was local. Hers was public, with witnesses sometimes present to confirm consummation. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some French courts, noble couples performed a bedding ceremony where kin tucked them in a ritual to bless the alliance, but creepy as all get out. Joke 1. Imagine your in-laws fluffing pillows while you fake a smile. Peasant brides like you had less pomp, but no less dread. Your bedchamber was private, sort of, but the village's eyes were just as sharp. Your dowry was chickens, not castles, but its loss stung just as much if you failed. Fertility was your currency like a noble's, but your child meant labor, not legacy. Noble brides bore the weight of dynasties. You bear the weight of survival. If you don't conceive, your husband's kin might scorn you, but a noblewoman's barrenness could spark war. Historians still argue whether noble brides had more agency due to their status, with some claiming they influenced courts through charm. You're not charmed, just tired, and the noblewoman's tight-lipped expression suggests she's not thrilled either. You barter an egg for a leek, the stall-keeper's gossip drifting over. She's talking about a noble bride from the nearby manor, wed at 15 to a lord thrice her age. Her dowry was land, but her husband's cruelty is legendary. You shudder, remembering your own fear of violence. Nobles might face less physical abuse status offered some shield, but emotional torment was fair game. A noble bride's husband could lock her in a tower for disobedience, her silence as enforced as yours. You're both trapped by the church's grip, that conjugal debt and superstitions, but her cage is gilded, yours muddy. Joke 2. Maybe she could bribe her lord with a fancy goblet, but he'd probably just drink from it. The market hums, and you spot a peasant girl newly wed, her eyes hollow. Her wedding night was likely like yours. Rough ale, a straw bed, and the same fertility pressure. But her labor's harsher fields, by day bedchamber, by night, no servants to ease the load. Noble brides had maids, midwives, even scribes to record their success. You scrub your own linens, birth your own babies, and pray you survive. Yet noble women face their own hell. Childbirth was just as deadly, and failure to produce a son could exile them to a convent. You both dread the bedchamber's politics, but her failure's a diplomatic crisis, yours a village scandal. Here's a fringe fact. In some Italian noble households, brides' wedding night sheets were embroidered with family crests, displayed like trophies to prove the alliance's completion. Your sheet was plain, but the village still demanded proof. You're both pawns, just on different boards. You think of your neighbor, a peasant wife who whispered about her husband's roughness and the noblewoman's rumored misery. The divide's real silk versus wool castles versus huts. But the terrors shared: betrothal's trap, dowry's price, virginity's test, consummation's proof, Politics, stakes, expectations, chains. Silence is gag, child brides is horror, church's rules, superstitions. Weight, fertility's burden, conjugal debt's claim, violence is threat, and widows repeat. Class changes the scenery, not the script. You head home the basket lighter, but your heart heavy. The noblewoman's velvet might hide her fear, but you see it in her stiff posture. You're both navigating a system that values your womb over your soul. You think of Marjorie Kempo, a merchant's wife who straddled peasant and noble worlds, her memoirs bearing the strain of both. If she, with her boldness, couldn't escape, what hope do you or that noble bride have? The market fades behind you, the path leading back to your hut, your husband, your role. You're starting to see the full machine. Every trap binds you, whether your bed's straw or silk. Noble or peasant, you're a wife, a vessel, a means to an end. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the nightmare of annulment, a failure that could ruin you. For now, you're still here. The egg's gone, your heart heavy with a truth that crosses class. No woman escapes this dread unscathed. Joke 3, maybe you could swap places with the noblewoman for a day, but you'd both just trade one cage for another. You're trudging back from the market, the empty basket swinging at your side, the village path slick with evening dew. The noblewoman's velvet veil and the peasant girl's hollow eyes still linger in your mind, a reminder that class divides brides, but not their fears. Now, as the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the thatched roofs, a new dread surfaces annulment. It's the nightmare lurking behind every marriage, a specter that could unravel everything: your dowry, your honor, your future. You kick a pebble, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, and feel the weight of a system where failure in the bedchamber could ruin you. Annulment's not just a word, it's a guillotine. Annulment in medieval Europe was a legal escape hatch, but one that rarely favored women. Historians note that by the 13th century, the Church's canon law allowed marriages to be voided for specific reasons: non-consummation fraud or pre-existing vows, among others. For you, the biggest threat is failing to complete the marriage. Remember that creaky bed and nosy guests. If the wedding night or subsequent nights don't count, your husband could petition to dissolve the union, leaving you disgraced and your family's dowry in limbo. A mainstream fact: in 1216, King John of England's daughter Joan had her marriage annulled for non-consummation, a rare case where status softened the blow. You're no princess, and the fallout for you would be brutal. You reach your hut, setting the basket by the door. Inside, the fire's low, its embers glowing like the fear in your gut. Your husband's out, but his presence haunts you. What if he claims you failed him? Non-consummation was the most common grounds for annulment. And it wasn't just about the act, it was about proof. If he says you refused or couldn't perform, the church might believe him. You've heard of women accused of frigidity or bewitchment, their word worthless against a man's. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some French courts, couples facing annulment were ordered to try again, under supervision, a mortifying ordeal called a congress. Joke 1, imagine a priest refereeing your bedchamber like it's a joust. The stakes are dizzying. An annulment doesn't just end the marriage, it erases it, declaring it never existed. Your dowry, that hard-won chest of goods, could be partially reclaimed by your family, but you're the one who pays. You'd be sent home a returned bride, your reputation in tatters. The village would whisper barren, defiant, cursed. You think of a woman from a nearby hamlet annulled after her husband claimed she resisted him. She's now a servant in her father's house, her dowry gone, her name mud. Historians still argue whether annulments protected women from bad matches or punished them for men's whims, with some claiming noble women had better legal recourse. You're no noble, and recourse feels like a fairy tale. You stoke the fire, the sparks flaring like your panic. The bedchamber's the crux. Every night's a test to avoid this fate. If you don't conceive like you feared, he might use it as evidence of failure. The conjugal debt doctrine demands you comply. But what if he's the problem? Men rarely faced blame. Impotence was a shameful secret, so wives were scapegoated. You've tried every superstition, Rosemary. Salt right side sleeping, but the pressure's crushing. The church's grip makes it worse, sanctifying the marriage while holding annulment over your head like a sword. Joke 2, maybe you could annul the marriage by claiming the mattress was cursed, but the priest would probably excommunicate you for creativity. The village plays its part, gossiping about flawed wives. You've overheard women at the well clucking about a bride whose marriage was voided for pre-contract, a prior betrothal her family hid. She was banished, her dowry seized. Annulment's a public shaming tying back to that virginity obsession and bedchamber politics. If your husband seeks it, he'll face scrutiny too. But he's got the church, the law, and the village on his side. You're alone your silence from those earlier days, now a liability. And here's a fringe fact. In some Italian dioceses, annulled wives were forced to wear gray veils in church, marking them as unbound and untouchable. You'd rather hide in a hayloft than face that. You pace the hut, the floorboards creaking under your weight. Your husband's temper, remember that fear of violence could push him to annulment if you displease him. A bad harvest, a barren womb, or a single refusal might be enough. The church courts are a gamble. Priests might sympathize, but they're men, and men stick together. You think of your cousin, whose friend faced an annulment trial. She swore she'd done her duty, but her husband's lies won out. She's now a beggar, her family broken by the dowry's loss. The system's a trap, punishing you for things beyond your control. You're starting to see how every piece fits. The betrothal locked you in the dowry, priced you. The virginity test judged you. The consummation bound you. The politics used you. The expectations chained you. The silence gagged you. The child brides shocked you. The church controlled you. The superstitions haunted you. The fertility burdened you. The conjugal debt claimed you. The violence threatened you. The widow's remarriage trapped them, and the class divide showed no escape. Annulment's the final axe ready to sever your place in this world. You think of Marjorie Kempa, who avoided annulment, but endured a marriage that tested her soul. If she barely survived, what chance do you have? You sit the fire's warmth, faint against your fear. Your husband's due back, and you'll face another night praying it's enough to keep annulment at bay. You're not just a wife. You're a tightrope walker balancing duty and dread to avoid a fall that could destroy you. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the absence of love, a void that makes every other burden heavier. For now, you're still here. The embers fading your heart heavy with a fear that never sleeps. Joke 3. Maybe you could annul the marriage by claiming you're allergic to his snoring, but the church doesn't buy sneezes as grounds. You're kneeling in the garden behind your hut, pulling weeds under a pale autumn sky, the earth cold and damp beneath your fingers. The village hums faintly, children shouting a hammer, striking anvil, but your thoughts are elsewhere, tangled in the annulment, fears that kept you up last night. Now, as you yank a stubborn root, another truth sinks in love. The kind you dreamed of as a girl is a ghost in this marriage. The bedchamber, the dowry, the church's rules, none of it leaves room for romance. You toss the weed aside, the air sharp with rotting leaves and regret, and feel the ache of a life where duty drowns affection. Love's absence isn't just a loss, it's a trap that makes every other burden heavier. Romantic love in medieval marriage was rare, a luxury sidelined by practical needs. Historians note that by the 14th century, marriages were contracts for alliances, labor or heirs, not partnerships of the heart. Nobles wed for power, peasants for survival, and emotions were secondary if considered at all. Your betrothal was a deal, your wedding night a transaction, and your husband's expectations a checklist. Love might bloom in stories like those of troubadours, singing of courtly passion, but in your world, it's a fleeting hope, crushed by reality. A mainstream fact in 1371, Chaucer's Book of the Duchess idealized love, but most marriages like yours were arranged with 90% of unions in England, driven by family strategy. Your heart's a bystander, and it stings. You stand brushing dirt from your kirtle and glance at the hut. Your husband's inside mending a tool, his gruff voice carrying. He's not cruel, not always, but he's not a lover either. You've shared a bed, meals, and chores, but not dreams. You once hoped for tenderness, a hand held a kind word, but his focus is heirs, labor, and obedience, tied to that conjugal debt and fertility pressure. You've learned to smile to play the wife, but the emptiness gnaws. Here's a quirky tidbit in some Italian villages. Couples exchanged love tokens, like ribbons at betrothals, but they were symbolic, not heartfelt, often pawned later for coin. Joke one, imagine trading a ribbon for a chicken and calling it romance. The absence of love isn't just personal, it's systemic. The betrothal didn't ask your heart. The dowry priced your worth, not your feelings. The virginity test judged your body, not your hopes. The consummation sealed a deal, not a bond. Every trap bedchamber politics, silence, church rules, superstitions. Violence prioritizes function over affection. You've seen couples who seem fond like the baker and his wife, but even their laughter feels practical, a way to ease the grind. Historians still argue whether love grew in arranged marriages, with some claiming familiarity bred affection over time. You're not feeling it, just a hollow space where warmth should be. You walk to the well, the bucket's weight familiar. The village women are there, gossiping about a new bride who adores her husband. Their smirks suggest it's naive, a phase before reality hits. Love's a risk. It makes you vulnerable, especially when your voice is silenced and violence looms. You've tried small gestures, cooking his favorite stew, mending his cloak, but he barely notices. The church preaches marital unity, but it's about duty, not devotion. You're supposed to love God, your husband, your role in that order, but it's hard when your heart's a bruise. Joke two, maybe you could carve a heart on the stew pot, but he'd probably just eat faster. The lack of love amplifies every fear. Without it, the bedchamber's a chore, not a comfort. Annulment's a threat, not a shared loss. You think of your friend, married 2 years, who once spoke of love, but now shrugs her husband's indifference a wall. She warned you to expect nothing, but you still hoped. Superstitions don't help. Those rosemary sprigs and fertility tonics promise heirs and not affection. The village romanticizes marriage with feasts and songs, but it's a facade hiding the grind of survival. And here's a fringe fact. In some German courts, love letters between noble couples were dictated by scribes, formulaic scripts to seal alliances, not confess feelings. Your life's a script, too, and love's not in it. You haul the water back, your arms aching. Your husband's at the door calling for supper. You nod, but your mind's on Agnes, the widow from before, now remarried. Her second marriage is loveless, too. Her new husband, more interested in her land than her heart. You wonder if she ever loved her first husband, or if she, like you, buried that hope under duty. The church's grip, the fertility demands, the conjugal debt, they all choke out tenderness. You're not just a wife, you're a worker, a vessel, a role with no space for softness. You think of child brides, noble women, peasants, all trapped in the same loveless machine. You're starting to see the full void. The betrothal stole your choice. The dowry priced you. The virginity judged you. The consummation bound you. The politics used you. The expectations chained you. The silence gagged you. The child brides shocked you. The church controlled you. The superstitions haunted you. The fertility burdened you. The conjugal debt claimed you. The violence threatened you. The widow's remarriage trapped them. The class divide showed no escape, and annulment loomed. Love's absence ties them together, a missing piece that makes every trap colder. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose memoirs hinted at seeking love beyond her husband through faith. If she, bold and devout, yearned for more, what chance do you have? You set the bucket down, the water sloshing. Supper's a task, another performance in a marriage without warmth. You're learning to live with the ache, to bury your dreams under the weight of survival. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the gossip that turns your private struggles into public sport. For now, you're still here. The garden fading your heart, heavy with a longing that has no place in this world. Joke 3, maybe you could plant a love tree in the garden, but it'd probably just grow turnips. You're at the village. Well, the bucket, heavy with water, the late afternoon air thick with the scent of damp straw and simmering pottage from nearby huts. It's been over a year since your wedding, and the absence of love still stings a quiet ache beneath the weight of your duties. But now, as you haul the rope, another burden presses in gossip. The women around you lean close, their voices low, dissecting a new bride's performance on her wedding night. Their words are sharp, slicing through reputations like a scythe, and you know you're not immune. You grip the rope tighter, your knuckles pale, and feel the sting of a world where your private struggles, bedchamber fertility, silence are public sport. Gossip was a powerful force in medieval communities, shaping social order and enforcing norms. Historians note that by the 14th century village and court, life thrived on rumor, especially about women's roles as wives. Your wedding night, your fertility, even your husband's mood are fodder for chatter, judged by neighbors who thrive on your missteps. A failed consummation or a barren womb could spark whispers that ruin your standing, tying back to every trap you've faced. Mainstream fact, in 1386, English church courts recorded cases of women slandered for unwifely behavior, with gossip leading to fines or public penance. Your life's on trial, and the jury's everyone you know. You glance at the women, their eyes flicking to your still flat belly. You haven't conceived, and they've noticed. One mutters about barren brides, her voice just loud enough to sting. You've heard it before, at church, at market whispers, tying your childlessness to curses or disobedience. The gossip's not just cruel, it's dangerous. A bad reputation could push your husband toward annulment, claiming you're defective, or worse, invite his temper. You remember that fear of violence, how a wrong move could bring a fist. Here's a quirky tidbit in some French villages. Gossipers held spinning bees, where women spun wool and stories their tales as binding as the threads. Joke 1. Imagine your life unraveled over a bad batch of yarn. The gossip's power lies in its reach. It starts at the well, but spreads to the priest, the elders, your in-laws. If you're noble courtiers, dissect your bedchamber success to gauge alliances. If peasant like you, neighbors judge your worth by your husband's smile. Your wedding night's bedsheet, that grim proof of virginity, was likely paraded, fueling talk. Did it show blood? Was it enough you cringe recalling the bawdy songs outside your chamber? The village thrives on these details, and any slip, real or invented, marks you. Historians still argue whether gossip empowered women as social enforcers or victimized them as targets, with some claiming it gave wives a subtle weapon. You're no weapon, just a target. Your silence, a flimsy shield. You haul the bucket up water sloshing. The women's chatter shifts to Agnes, the remarried widow. They're mocking her new husband's weakness, implying she's not pleasing him. You wince, knowing Agnes's dread mirrors yours. Gossip doesn't spare widows' nobles or child brides. It's a blade for all. You've tried to dodge it keeping your head down, but it's impossible. Last week, you snapped at your husband over a burnt loaf, and by market day, the baker's wife was clucking about your sharp tongue. The church condemns slander, but does little to stop it leaving you exposed. Joke 2. Maybe you could gossip about the priest's bad sermons, but he'd probably excommunicate the well. The worst part, gossip feeds every trap. It polices your virginity, questions your fertility, amplifies your husband's expectations, and fuels annulment fears. If you resist, the conjugal debt whispers call you cold. If you conceive, they'll debate if the child's legitimate. Superstitions make it worse. Some say gossip itself curses a marriage, as if words could sour your womb. You've seen it destroy women. A neighbor slandered for refusing her husband lost her dowry in a church dispute. Her shame's a warning, tying back to that voicelessness you've learned to wear like a cloak. And here's a fringe fact. In some German towns, gossip fines were levied on women whose rumors sparked fights, a rare attempt to curb the chaos. You wish they'd fine the whole village. You carry the water home, your arms aching. Your husband's at the table sharpening a knife, his mood unreadable. You're careful not to provoke him, knowing gossip could twist any argument into proof of your failure. You think of your friend, whose miscarriage last year was blamed on her sins. The village's whispers, driving her to isolation. She warned you to ignore the tongues, but they're impossible to escape. The church's grip, the bedchamber's politics. The threat of violence, they all feed on gossip, turning your private pain into a public verdict. You're not just a wife. You're a story rewritten by every wagging tongue. You're starting to see the full web. The betrothal trapped you. The dowry priced you. The virginity judged you. The consummation bound. You, the politics, used you. The expectations chained you. The silence gagged you. The child brides shocked you. The church controlled you. The superstitions haunted you. The fertility burdened you. The conjugal debt claimed you. The violence threatened you. The widow's remarriage trapped them. The class divide showed no escape. The annulment loomed, and love's absence hollowed you. gossip's the thread weaving them into a net that catches every move. You think of Marjorie Kempa, whose bold voice sparked gossip that branded her a heretic. If she couldn't silence the whispers, what chance do you have? You set the bucket down the water's ripples, catching the firelight. Supper's another task, another chance for judgment if the stew's too thin. You're learning to live under scrutiny, to smile through the sting of words you can't control. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the medical misconceptions that make your body a mystery even to you. For now, you're still here. The wells chatter, fading your heart, heavy with a shame that's not yours to bear. Joke 3. Maybe you could start a rumor that gossipers turn into toads, but the village would probably just gossip about the toads. You're hunched over a pot of pottage in your hut, stirring the bubbling mix of barley, and leaks the steam rising with the sharp tang of herbs. The firelight flickers, casting shadows that dance like the village gossip, still ringing in your ears from the well. It's been over a year since your wedding, and the weight of scrutiny, your barrenness, your duty presses harder each day. Now, as you stir, a new layer of dread surfaces, the medieval world's bizarre medical misconceptions about your body. You're expected to conceive, to perform, to survive. But the knowledge guiding those demands is a tangle of myth and error that makes your role as a wife even more bewildering. You grip the spoon, the wood worn smooth, and feel the knot of a system that misunderstands you at every turn. Medieval medicine was a chaotic blend of ancient texts, folklore, and church doctrine, often wrong about women's bodies. Historians note that by the 14th century, physicians relied on Greek and Roman theories like Galen's, which claimed women's wombs wandered or needed balancing through intimacy. Your failure to conceive, still a gossip magnet, isn't seen as biology, but as a flaw, maybe a sin to be fixed with potions or prayers. These misconceptions shaped your wedding night, your fertility struggles, and even your husband's expectations, piling on pressure rooted in nonsense. A mainstream fact, in 1300, the medical text, Trotula, advised women to use herbal fumigations to correct their wombs, a widely accepted but useless remedy. Your body's a mystery, and the experts are guessing. You set the spoon down the pottage simmering. Your mother-in-law visited yesterday, pressing a foul-smelling sachet of rue and nettles into your hand, claiming it'll open your womb. You tried at holding it under your shift, as she instructed, but felt nothing but foolish. The village midwifes know better. She suggested tying a weasel's foot to your belt for fertility, a remedy you politely declined. These aren't just quirks. They're the science of your world, and failing to follow them invites blame. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some English villages, women were told to sit over steaming pots of garlic to draw a baby into the womb, a ritual as absurd as it sounds. Joke 1. Imagine explaining to your husband why the hut smells like a garlic festival. The misconceptions run deeper than potions. Your wedding night, remember that creaky bed was shaped by beliefs that intimacy balanced your humors, a medical must for health. If you resisted, you weren't just defying the conjugal debt. You were sickening yourself, or so the priest claimed. The church's grip tied medicine to morality, calling barrenness a divine curse. You've prayed, you've tried the sachets, but nothing works, and the gossipers whisper you're closed or cold. Historians still argue whether these beliefs controlled women or reflected genuine fear of infertility, with some saying midwives offered practical help. You're not helped, just judged your body a puzzle no one understands. You step to the window, the evening air cool against your face. The village midwife's tales scare you most. She claims your womb's tilted because you walked under a full moon, a theory as wild as those superstitions about spirits. Childbirth, if you conceive, is another terror medieval medicine thinks bleeding you. During labor purges bad humors, a practice that's killed women. You know, your neighbor pregnant last year died. After such a cure, her baby lost too. Yet you are expected to produce heirs no matter the risk, because the village your husband and the church demand it. Joke 2, maybe you could convince the midwife your womb's on vacation, but she'd probably prescribe boiled toad. The misconceptions hit hardest in the bedchamber. Your husband believes intimacy must be frequent to heat your womb, a notion from scholars like Avicenna, whose texts reached Europe. He's not wrong to trust it, everyone does, but it makes your duty relentless, tying back to that conjugal debt and fertility pressure. If you don't conceive, he might think you're defective, a step toward annulment's nightmare. You've heard of women blamed for weak seed their husbands never questioned. And here's a fringe fact. In some Italian towns, doctors tested women's fertility by rubbing garlic on their skin. If it didn't stink, they were barren. You'd laugh if it weren't your life on the line. You return to the pottage, stirring absently. Your mother warned you to trust the midwife, but her remedies feel like guesses, and her warnings a void. Cats don't weave at night sound like those rosemary sprig superstitions. The village believes them, though, and their gossip judges your every move. If you miscarry or stay childless, they'll blame your cold womb or sins, not the herbs that do nothing. You think of your cousin, who drank a midwife's tonic and fell ill, her pregnancy lost. She was shunned, her failure a public verdict. The system's a maze, and medical myths are its walls, trapping you with every step. You're starting to see the full tangle. The betrothal locked you in the dowry, priced you. The virginity judged you. The consummation bound you. The politics used you. The expectations chained you. The silence gagged you. The child brides shocked you. The church controlled you. The superstitions haunted you. The fertility burdened you. The conjugal debt claimed you. The violence threatened you. The widow's remarriage trapped them. The class divide showed no escape. The annulment loomed. The love's absence hollowed you, and the gossip stung. Medical misconceptions weave through them, turning your body into a battleground of bad ideas. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose 14 pregnancies were cured by these same myths, her suffering ignored. If she endured, what chance do you have? You ladle the pottage into a bowl, your husband's boots thudding outside. He'll eat, then expect you in the bedchamber, another night of balancing your humors. You're learning to hide your fear, to swallow the bitter tonics and bitterer truths. The next trap's waiting, and it's about how women like you survived these nights clinging to scraps of resilience. For now, you're still here. The fire fading, your heart heavy with a body you're told is failing you. Joke 3. Maybe you could tell the midwife your womb's just napping, but she'd probably wake it with a weasel's foot. You're lying on the straw mattress in your hut, the night deep and quiet. The air heavy with the scent of cooling embers and damp wool. It's been over a year since your wedding, and the medical misconceptions about your body, those weasel feet and garlic potions, still haunt your thoughts, mingling with the gossip and annulment fears. But now, as you stare at the ceiling's cracks, a flicker of something else stirs survival. You've endured the bedchamber's demands, the church's rules, and your husband's temper, and you're still here. You pull the blanket closer, the coarse weave scratching your skin, and wonder how women like you clawed through the dread of wedding nights and beyond. Resilience isn't loud, but it's stubborn, and you're starting to see how it works. Survival for medieval women was a quiet art, woven from small acts of endurance and cunning within a system designed to break them. Historians note that by the 14th century, women navigated marriage's traps, betrothals, dowries, conjugal debt through practical strategies, emotional armor, and subtle defiance. You're not rebelling openly. That's a luxury for the bold or the doomed. Instead, you're learning to bend, to cope, to carve out scraps of control in a world that offers none. A mainstream fact in 1390s England manorial records show women pooling resources, spinning brewing to gain leverage in their households, a quiet way to offset marital power imbalances. You're no noble, but you're finding your own ways to survive. You shift the mattress creaking and think of your wedding night. That creaky bed, the nosy guests, the fear. You got through it by counting breaths, focusing on the candle's flicker to anchor yourself. Since then, you've honed small tricks. When your husband's temper flares, you lower your eyes and hum a tune under your breath, a shield against his words. When the village gossips about your childlessness, you nod and change the subject, deflecting their barbs. These aren't grand gestures, but they're yours. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some French villages, women hid protection charms, knotted threads, or dried herbs in their clothing. Not just for spirits, but to boost courage. Joke 1. Imagine slipping a bravery thimble into your kirtle to face the in-laws. Survival's not just mental, it's practical. You've started bartering extra eggs at market, saving a few coins in a clay jar under the floorboard. It's not much, but it's yours, a hedge against annulment or widowhood's traps. You've seen other women do this. Your neighbor, a wife of 5 years, trades wool for grain. Her small wealth, a buffer against her husband's debts. The church preaches submission, but it can't stop these quiet moves. You're also learning your husband's rhythms, when to speak, when to stay silent, dodging the violence that looms. Historians still argue whether these strategies gave women agency or merely delayed defeat, with some claiming peasants had more flexibility than nobles, bound by court politics. You're no scholar, but every coin saved feels like a tiny victory. You sit up the moonlight slipping through the shutters. The bedchamber's still a battlefield, but you've found ways to cope. You've mastered performing for the conjugal debt, faking enthusiasm to keep him content, a trick your friend taught you. It's exhausting, but it buys peace. You've also leaned on other women market chats, shared chores, where coded words hint at shared struggles. Your cousin married 3 years, taught you to slip mint into your pottage to calm your nerves before bed. These bonds are lifelines tying back to that resilience against fertility, pressure, gossip, and medical myths. Joke 2, maybe you could start a wives' survival guild, but the priest would probably call it witchcraft. The village doesn't see your strength. To them, you're a wife, judged by your womb and your smile. But you're more, you're a strategist, navigating a maze of betrothals, dowries, virginity tests, consummation, politics, expectations, silence, child brides, church rules, superstitions, fertility, conjugal debt, violence, widow's remarriage class, divides, annulment, fears, love's absence, gossip and medical nonsense. Each trap's a test, and you're passing not with banners, but with grit. And here's a fringe fact. In some Italian towns, women kept secret diaries, scraps of cloth with embroidered symbols to record their struggles, a hidden voice, when silence was law. You don't embroider, but your jar of coins is your diary, your proof of endurance. You think of your mother, who survived 2 decades of marriage with a sharp wit and a knack for losing her husband's worst shirts. She warned you to find your corners, those small spaces of control. You're finding them in the garden, where you plant extra herbs to trade. In the bedchamber, where you time your duties to avoid his worst moods. In the village, where you smile at gossips, but never trust them. These aren't rebellions, but they're enough to keep you whole. You're not Marjorie Kempe, whose memoirs shouted her survival through faith and defiance. You're quieter, but no less determined. The worst part, survival's invisible. Your husband doesn't notice your strategies. The village doesn't praise your strength. They see a wife, not a warrior. But you know better. Every day you wake, cook, weave, and endure, you're winning against a system that expects you to crumble. The traps, betrothal, dowry, virginity, all of them haven't broken you yet. You're learning to live with the fear, to carry the weight, to find joy in small things. A warm fire, a kind word from a friend, a coin added to your jar. Joke 3. Maybe you could survive by teaching the village goats to barter eggs, but they'd eat the profits. You're starting to see the full scope of your strength. Every trap has forged you. Betrophal's cage, dowry's price, virginity's judgment, consummation's proof, politics, stakes, expectations, chains, silence's gag, child brides as shock, church's control, superstitions, haunt, fertility's burden, conjugal debt's claim, violence's threat, widow's remarriage class, divide's annulment's loom, love's absence, gossip's sting, medical myth's maze. You're not free, but you're surviving, and that's a rebellion in itself. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the whispers of women who dared to defy even quietly. For now, you're still here, the night fading, your heart steady with resilience you're only beginning to name. You're standing in the doorway of your hut, the early morning mist curling around the village like a shroud, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass and baking bread from a neighbor's oven. It's been over a year since your wedding, and the quiet resilience you've built, those coins hidden under the floorboard, those coded chats at the well, keeps you steady. But now, as you watch women hurry to market, your thoughts drift to the whispers of those who dared to defy the marriage traps, even in small ways. They're not rebels with banners, but their subtle acts of resistance spark something in you. You lean against the doorframe, the wood cool under your palm, and feel a flicker of hope in a world that demands your submission. Defiance in medieval marriage was rare and risky, but women found ways to push back against the system's weight. Historians note that by the 14th century, some wives used cunning community or even legal loopholes to carve out agency within the confines of betrothals, dowries, and conjugal debt. These weren't loud revolts. Open rebellion could mean beatings, shunning, or worse, but quiet subversions that chipped away at the rules. You're not storming a castle, but you're starting to see how small acts can bend the bars of your cage. A mainstream fact in 1370s England manorial court records show women refusing to pay merched fines for marrying without a lord's permission, a subtle stand against feudal control. You're no noble, but their whispers inspire you. You step outside the mud squelching under your shoes. At the market last week, you overheard 2 women talking about a wife who lost her husband's best cloak to avoid a feast where she'd be paraded. It was no accident she traded it for grain, her defiance hidden in a shrug. You've done similar forgetting to cook his favorite stew when he snapped at you a tiny rebellion cloaked in innocence. These acts tie back to your survival strategies, but they're bolder, a step toward reclaiming power. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some French villages, women accidentally spilled ale on meddling in-laws' shoes during feasts, a passive-aggressive jab at their oversight. Joke 1: imagine dousing your mother-in-law's hem and blaming a clumsy spirit. Defiance wasn't just personal, it was communal. Women shared tactics and hushed tones, like your cousin who taught you to oversalt a dish to dodge a night in the bedchamber. At Spinning Bees, where gossip thrived, they swapped more than rumors, hints on dodging conjugal debt, like feigning illness with a convincing cough. You've tried it, clutching your stomach to buy a night's peace. These whispers are a lifeline, a secret network against the church's grip, the fertility pressure, and the threat of violence. Historians still argue whether these acts were true resistance or mere coping with some claiming peasants had more room to maneuver than nobles bound by court etiquette. You're no scholar, but every lost cloak feels like a spark. You head to the garden kneeling to check your herbs. You've started growing extra mint, trading it for cloth scraps to sew into a secret pouch, a defiance your husband doesn't suspect. You think of a woman from a nearby village who refused her husband's bed for a month, claiming holy visions inspired by the Virgin Mary. The priest was skeptical, but the village half believed her buying her time. Its risky gossip could have ruined her tying back to that public sting, but she stood firm. Her story's a whisper. You carry a reminder that defiance, even small, can shift the ground under you. Joke 2: maybe you could claim a vision of a saint who hates pottage, but the priest would probably demand a sermon. The church and village make defiance dangerous. The conjugal debt doctrine labels refusal a sin, and annulment looms if you push too far. Yet some women gambled. You've heard of a noblewoman who bribed a scribe to forge a pre-contract letter, voiding her betrothal to a cruel lord. She was caught, but the audacity lingers. Peasants like you take smaller risks hiding a coin, misplacing a tool, or bartering behind your husband's back. These acts don't topple the system: betrothal, dowry, virginity tests. All the traps still hold, but they're cracks in its armor. And here's a fringe fact: in some Italian towns, women left cursed trinkets, like a knotted thread in their husbands' paths, a superstitious jab believed to curb tempers. You haven't tried it, but the idea's tempting. You pluck a sprig of mint, its sharp scent grounding you. Your husband's in the fields, oblivious to your growing defiance. You're not bold like that vision woman, but you're learning. When he demands too much, you've started offering bland agreement, then doing things your way, sowing barley instead of rye, trading eggs for what you need. It's not freedom, but it's control, a shield against his expectations and the violence that lurks. You think of your mother, who forgot her husband's orders to host his kin, saving her strength for her garden. She warned you to pick your fights in shadows, and you're starting to understand. The village doesn't see your rebellion. To them, you're a wife, judged by your womb and your cooking. But other women notice the ones who nod knowingly when you spill ale or lose a chore. You're part of their whisper network, a chain of defiance that links child brides, widows, nobles, and peasants. You're not Marjorie Kempe, whose loud faith defied norms and sparked gossip. Your rebellion's quieter, but it's real, a thread woven through every trap: betrophal's cage, dowry's price, virginity's judgment, consummation's proof, politics, stakes, Expectations. Chains. Silence is gag. Child brides is shock. Churches control superstitions. Haunt, fertility's burden. Conjugal debts claim. Violence is threat. Widows' remarriage class divides annulments loom. Love's absence. Gossips sting. Medical myths. Maze survival's grit. Defiance is your spark, small, but stubborn. You head back to the hut, the mint tucked in your sleeve. Your husband's due soon, and you'll face another night balancing duty and your secret pouch. You're learning to live with the traps to find power in the margins. The next trap's waiting, and it's about how these customs slowly shifted, easing the weight for women after you. For now, you're still here. The mist lifting your heart steady with a defiance you're only beginning to name. Joke 3, maybe you could misplace his boots and blame a mischievous fairy. But fairies don't barter, as well as you do. You're sitting on a stool by the hearth, mending a torn kirtle under the dim glow of a tallow candle. The hut quiet, except for the fire's soft crackle and the distant hoot of an owl. The scent of burnt wood and old wool fills the air, grounding you as your thoughts wander. It's been nearly 2 years since your wedding, and the whispers of defiance, those lost cloaks and secret pouches, have kindled a quiet strength in you. But now, as you stitch, you ponder how these suffocating marriage customs from betrothals to bedchamber terrors began to shift over time. The traps you've endured weren't eternal. They evolved, loosening for women who came later. You thread the needle your fingers steady and feel a strange mix of envy and hope for a future you'll never see. Medieval marriage customs began shifting in the late Middle Ages, roughly the 14th to 15th centuries, as economic, social, and religious changes reshaped Europe. Historians note that by the 1400s, rising urban economies and the Black Death's labor shortages gave women slightly more leverage in marriage negotiations. The church's grip, while still iron, faced challenges from reformist ideas, and some women gained modest control over their fates. These changes were slow, uneven, and often limited to wealthier or urban women, but they cracked the system that bound you. Betrothals, dowries, conjugal debt, and all. A mainstream fact in 1430s Florence city records show women increasingly negotiating their dowries, a small step toward agency unthinkable in your village. You're still trapped, but the horizon's shifting. You pause, the needle hovering. Your life betrothal at 12 dowries price. Wedding night's dread is rooted in a world where marriage was survival. But in cities, things were changing. The Black Death, a grim reaper in the 1340s, killed so many that surviving women found new roles. Widows ran shops, spinsters worked as weavers. Some delayed marriage, choosing labor over a husband's yoke. You've heard tales of city women refusing matches, their families too desperate for their wages to force them. It's not your reality. Your village clings to old ways, but it's a spark. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some Italian towns, women formed spinsters' guilds by the 1400s, pooling resources to avoid marriage altogether, a defiance you can only dream of. Joke 1, imagine a guild where you trade dowry chests for spinning wheels and call it freedom. The church's rules, like that conjugal debt doctrine, didn't vanish, but cracks appeared. Reformist preachers, precursors to the Reformation, questioned strict marital control, arguing for mutual consent. By the 15th century, some church courts let women contest forced betrothals, especially if they proved coercion. You think of your own betrothal, a deal you couldn't refuse. In a century, you might have had a voice, however faint. Noble women led the charge. Think of Christine de Pizan, writing in the 1400s, who criticized marriage's chains. Her words didn't reach your hut, but they stirred change, loosening the virginity tests and annulment threats for others. Historians still argue whether these shifts empowered women or just tweaked the system with some claiming urban wealth was the real driver. You're no city dweller, but the idea of choice feels like a warm hearth. You resume stitching the curdle's tier, closing slowly. Economic shifts helped too. As towns grew, women's labor, brewing, sewing, selling gained value. You barter eggs for cloth, a small defiance, but in cities, women parlayed skills into dowry exemptions or delayed weddings. Peasants like you were slower to benefit, but the ripple reached villages. You've noticed younger girls in your village betrothed, later at 15 or 16, their families needing their hands in the fields. It's not freedom, but it's time a buffer against child brides' horrors. The fertility pressure and gossip still sting, but some women especially. Widows now keep their land without remarrying, a change Agnes would have envied. Joke 2. Maybe you could start a village egg bartering guild to delay your sister's betrothal, but the goats would probably join first. Superstitions and medical myths, like those weasel feet, also waned. By the late 1400s, early humanists questioned old remedies, and midwives in cities leaned on observation over folklore. Childbirth remained deadly, but better care herbal tonics that actually worked saved some. You've suffered under garlic potions and moonlit warnings, but future brides might face less nonsense. The bedchamber's politics and violence didn't vanish, but communal oversight, like those noisy bedding ceremonies, faded in urban areas, giving couples a sliver of privacy. You're still dodging your husband's temper and the village's eyes, but the shift's a whisper of relief for others. You set the curdle aside, the candle sputtering. These changes tie back to your defiance, those coins, those coded chats. Women like you, quietly resisting, helped nudge the system. Your secret pouch isn't just survival. It's a seed part of a slow rebellion that bloomed later. You think of your cousin, who misplaced her husband's tool to avoid his kin's visit. Her small act, like yours, ripples forward. And here's a fringe fact. In some 15th century German towns, women petitioned lords to limit merchant fines, arguing their labor-deserved freedom. They didn't win fully, but their voices echoed a defiance you carry in your jar of coins. You're starting to see the arc. Every trap, betrothal's cage, dowry's price, virginity's judgment, consummation's proof, politics, stakes, expectations, chains, silence is gag, child brides is shock, church's control, superstitions, haunt, fertility's burden, conjugal debt's claim, violence's threat, widow's remarriage class divides annulment's loom, love's absence, gossip's sting, medical myths, maze, survival's grit, defiance's spark paved the way for change. You're not free, but your endurance, your quiet rebellion is part of the shift. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose bold words in the 1400s challenged marriage's chains. If she helped move the needle, maybe your coins do too. You stand stretching your cramped hands. Your husband's asleep, the bedchamber waiting, but you feel stronger, knowing your struggle's not the end. The next trap's waiting, and it's about the lasting trauma these customs left on women like you. For now, you're still here. The candle fading your heart steady with a hope that outlives your pain. Joke 3. Maybe you could stitch a future freedom banner, but your husband would probably use it as a napkin. You're sitting on a low stool by the hut's open door, the late evening breeze carrying the scent of damp earth and distant hearth fires. It's been nearly 2 years since your wedding, and the slow shift in marriage customs. Those whispers of change from the cities feels like a distant dream in your village. The candle beside you gutters, casting flickering shadows as your thoughts turn to the lasting scars left by the traps you've endured. Betrothals, dowries, bedchamber terrors, and all the rest. The trauma of medieval women like you isn't just a fleeting pain. It's a wound that lingers, shaping your days and nights long after the wedding bells fade. You clutch a worn shawl, the wool fraying, and feel the weight of a hurt that's as much a part of you as your own skin. Medieval women carried the trauma of marriage in their bodies and minds, a silent legacy of a system that demanded submission. Historians note that by the 14th century, sources like court records and rare personal accounts like those of mystics hint at the psychological toll of forced unions, fertility pressures, and violence. Your wedding night with its creaky bed and nosy guests wasn't just a moment, it was a fracture, one that echoes in your sleepless nights and wary glances. The cumulative weight of every trap, betrothal, dowry, virginity tests, and more left marks that didn't heal. A mainstream fact in 1390s England, church court records show women seeking separations for cruelty, their testimonies revealing years of fear and despair, though few won relief. You're still here, but the scars are real. You shift the stool, creaking, and stare into the dark. That first night's terror, remember the tallow smoke and pounding heart still creeps into your dreams. You wake sometimes gasping the memory of his heavy hand or the village's eyes pinning you down. The conjugal debt, the gossip, the medical myths, they've woven a knot of anxiety that tightens when he's near. You've learned to hide it, to smile through the pottage stirring. But it's there, a dull ache. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some French villages, women wore grief knots in their hair after childbirth, or loss, a subtle signal of their inner wounds, unnoticed by most. Joke 1. Imagine tying a knot for every time you bit your tongue, but you'd run out of hair. The trauma's not just personal, it's generational. Your mother's tight-lipped warnings, your cousin's hollow eyes, Agnes's remarriage dread, they all carry it. The betrothal that stole your choice at 12 left you distrustful. The dowry's price made you feel like chattel, and the virginity test stripped your dignity. Each trap layered shame, fear, or resignation, and you see it in other women, the way they flinch at a raised voice, the way they hush their daughters. Historians still argue whether this trauma was universal or varied by class, with some claiming noble women's status cushioned them. You're no noble, and the peasant women around you bear the same haunted look, their resilience hard-won but costly. You stand pacing to the window, the night air sharp. The fertility pressure, still no child has carved a special kind of wound. Every month's failure brings fresh gossip, your mother-in-law's sighs, and your own guilt, as if your body's betraying you. Those medical misconceptions like weasel feet and garlic steams only deepen the shame, making you question yourself. The threat of violence lingers too. Your husband's temper, though rare, spikes when you fail him, tying back to that fear of a raised hand. You've survived like you learned, but survival doesn't erase the marks, it buries them. Joke 2. Maybe you could blame your trauma on a cursed turnip, but the village would just gossip about the turnip. The church's grip worsens it. Its sermons call suffering holy, but they don't soothe the nightmares of child brides or the dread of annulment. You've prayed for peace, but the church's answer is endurance, not healing. You think of your friend, whose miscarriage last year left her weeping in secret, the village blaming her sins. Her trauma's a mirror to yours, a shared wound no priest acknowledges. And here's a fringe fact. In some Italian convents, women who fled marriages wrote lament poems, hidden verses about their pain, a rare voice for their scars. You don't write, but your secret coin jar feels like your poem, a quiet record of your endurance. The village doesn't see your trauma. To them, you're a wife, judged by your cooking, and your womb, not your heart. But other women know they see it in your tight smile, your quick glance away. You've shared glances with Agnes, with your cousin, with the market women. A silent language of survival and pain. The defiance you've learned hiding coins, misplacing chores, isn't just rebellion. It's a balm, a way to reclaim a piece of yourself. But it doesn't erase the nights you've lain awake, reliving the bedchamber's pressures or fearing gossip's sting. You're not just a wife, you're a survivor carrying wounds no one names. You're starting to see the full cost. Every trap, betrothal's cage, dowry's price, virginity's judgment, consummation's proof, politics, stakes, expectations, chains, silence's gag, child brides as shock, church's control, superstitions, haunt fertility's burden, conjugal debt's claim, violence's threat, widow's remarriage class divides annulment's loom, love's absence, gossip's sting, medical myths, maze, survival's grit, defiance's spark, custom's shift, left a scar. They've shaped you not just into a wife, but into a woman who carries trauma like a shadow. You think of Marjorie Kempe, whose memoirs bared her pain, her faith a fragile shield against it. If she couldn't fully heal, what chance do you have? You sit again, the candle nearly spent. Your husband's asleep, but the bedchamber waits a reminder of every fear and wound. You're stronger now, your defiance a quiet fire, but the trauma lingers a weight you'll carry forever. The next trap's waiting, and it's about how these medieval fears echo in today's world, a thread that binds you to women across centuries. For now, you're still here, the night deepening your heart, heavy with scars that whisper but never fade. Joke 3, maybe you could stitch your trauma into a quilt, but it'd probably scare the village goats. You're curled up by the hearth, the fire reduced to glowing embers, the hut wrapped in the stillness of a late July night in 2025. The air carries the faint scent of ash and the straw mattress you've come to know too well. It's been over 2 years since your wedding, and the trauma of those traps, betrothals, dowries, bedchamber fears, and all the rest still lingers like a bruise. As you pull your shawl tighter, your thoughts drift beyond your village, beyond the Middle Ages, to the modern world. The customs that crushed you have faded, but their echoes ripple through today's marital pressures, binding you to women across centuries. You stare into the embers, the warmth fading, and see how your dread mirrors theirs, softer, but no less real. Medieval marriage was a machine of control, but modern marriage, while freer, carries shadows of those old traps. Historians note that by the 21st century, women gained legal and social agency, choosing partners, owning property, defying forced unions. But societal expectations still weigh heavy. Today's women face pressures to be perfect partners, mothers, or careerists, echoing your fertility demands and gossip's sting. Love may drive modern vows, but the fear of failing as a spouse judged by family or society feels hauntingly familiar. A mainstream fact in 2020's Europe studies showed 70% of women felt pressured to balance motherhood and work a modern mirror to your role as a vessel for heirs and labor. You're centuries apart, but the weight's the same. You shift the stool creaking under you. In your time, betrothals stole your choice. Today, women choose, but social media and dating apps create new cages, pressure to curate a perfect relationship judged by likes and followers. You faced village gossips. Modern women face online scrutiny, their lives dissected like your wedding night's bedsheet. You've endured the conjugal debt's claim, the church's grip, the violence's threat. Modern women dodge subtler versions, emotional labor, unequal chores, or societal shaming for failing at marriage. Here's a quirky tidbit in 2020s. America wedding influencers dictate trends like medieval priests, blessed beds, their followers scrambling to meet impossible standards. Joke 1, imagine your village gossips with Instagram rating your pottage with hashtags. The trauma you carry those sleepless nights, the fear of annulment finds echoes too. Modern women speak of anxiety from balancing roles, their mental health strained by expectations to be everything lover, mother, breadwinner. Your barrenness sparked gossip. Today's women face judgment for delaying motherhood or choosing none labeled selfish, like widows who resisted remarriage. The church's rules have faded, but cultural norms still preach perfection, tying back to your fertility pressure and silence. Historians still argue whether modern women's agency outpaces lingering patriarchal shadows, with some claiming economic independence frees them. You're no economist, but you know freedom doesn't erase dread. You stand pacing to the window, the night air soft against your face. Your medical misconceptions, garlic steams, weasel feet are gone, replaced by science. Yet women today face new myths, fertility deadlines, biological clocks, or wellness fads, promising perfect pregnancies. Your bedchamber was a battlefield of politics and violence. Modern bedrooms carry subtler wars, unequal emotional work pressure to perform intimacy. You think of your cousin, her defiance in misplacing chores, and see today's women quietly resisting setting boundaries, demanding equality. It's not your secret coin jar, but it's defiance all the same. Joke 2, maybe modern women could lose a Wi-Fi router to dodge a toxic in-law Zoom call. The village's gaze feels like today's social media, where every choice, marriage, kids, career is judged. Your annulment fears mirror modern divorce stigma, especially for women who fail to keep a partner. Love's absence hollowed you. Today, women chase love, but face pressure to stay desirable, fertile, perfect. You think of Agnes, the widow, trapped again by remarriage, and see women today pressured to remarry or move on after loss. The class divide persists, wealthier. Women have more choices like noble brides, but the rest, like you juggle survival and expectation. And here's a fringe fact. In 2020s, Britain relationship coaches sell courses on winning at marriage, echoing medieval midwives' tonics for fixin' wives. You'd laugh if it didn't feel so familiar. You're starting to see the thread. Every trap you faced, betrophal's cage, dowry's price, virginity's judgment, consummation's proof, politics, stakes, expectations, chains, silence's gag, child brides is shock, church's control, superstitions, haunt fertility's burden, conjugal debt's claim, violence's threat, widow's remarriage class, divides annulment's loom, love's absence, gossip's sting, medical myths, maze, survival's grit, defiance's spark, customs shift, trauma's scar echoes in today's pressures. You're not just a medieval wife. You're a link in a chain of women navigating dread then and now. You think of Marjorie Kempa, her bold voice a bridge to modern women who speak out their blogs, and posts a new memoir of struggle. You sit again, the embers nearly gone, their faint glow a whisper of warmth. The world's changed cities gleam. Women vote, love's a choice, but the dread lingers softer, subtler yet there. You've survived your traps, your coins and coded chats, a quiet rebellion, and modern women carry their own saying. No chasing dreams, healing trauma. The night wraps you in its calm, the village asleep, your heart steady. You're not free, but you're part of something larger, a story of women enduring, resisting hoping. As the fire dies, you feel a gentle peace, the weight of centuries easing. You're connected, your pain, a thread in a tapestry that stretches to now, where women still fight, still dream, still survive. The embers fade their soft crackle, a lullaby. You're safe here in this quiet moment, a hut a haven for now. The traps are real, but so is your strength echoing in every woman who came after. Let the night hold you. Let the stars whisper of a world that's slowly learning. Sleep comes softly, carrying you from dread to dreams, where the weight lifts, if only for a breath. Rest now, knowing your story lives on a spark in the dark, guiding others to their own quiet victories.